escalonamos cerrando para nosotros. Esto es lo que quiero demostrar, lo que puede ser el dinero y el poder, o sea, literal, o sea,
July 7th, 2022. A TikToker shut down a bridge in Mexico with luxury cars just to shoot a video. This angered one of Mexico's most dangerous cartels, and what they did to him changed the course of his life forever. Rodolfo Marquez, also known as Fofo Marquez, is a controversial Mexican influencer who has millions of followers across his social media. Born on the 15th of July 1997, Fofo was undoubtedly born into a wealthy family. There's not much information on his family background. Still, from what we know, his grandfather made shoes for high-profile dignitaries in Mexico, while his father was one of the owners of Total Gas Station before he passed away. Now, it's obvious Fofo comes from a wealthy background, and his social media personality basically revolves around him posing in the most luxurious cars, going to clubs with his friends, and living that Mexican dream. It was also through sharing his luxurious lifestyle on social media that he garnered more than 3 million gram followers, making him what Gen Zs call an influencer. However, Fofo's fame on IG wasn't enough. He decided to navigate his way to TikTok, where he established a fan base, but also began getting himself in trouble. A lot of people had eyes on him, and of course wanted to bring him down, but Fofo didn't care. He had a huge ego, and felt like he was unstoppable. But all that ego was crushed down to the ground the moment he messed with one of Mexico's deadliest cartels, the new Jalisco Generation Cartel, aka CJNG. I'd be doing you a huge injustice if I didn't tell you about the severity of this crime syndicate and its ruthless methods. Once you're aware of their operations, you'll understand why anyone, even someone as seemingly insignificant as a TikToker, would face serious danger by crossing paths with them. In fact, a number of TikTokers featured in this video have unfortunately encountered this very same criminal group, and I can't help but wonder why. We are the new group Matazetas, and we are against kidnapping and extortion, and we will fight them in all states for a cleaner Mexico. Those were the words written in a note by the Jalisco New Generation Cartel back in June 2009, after they executed 3 Mexicans and dumped their bodies in a truck. Mexican authorities initially underestimated these guys as a minor faction within a larger cartel. However, the CJNG swiftly demonstrated its menace by executing 35 members of rival cartels and discarding their bodies in various vehicles along the Mexican highway. The cartel's leader, Nemesio Segueda Cervantes, also known as El Mencho, has gained a notorious reputation of being the devil in human form. Born on July 17, 1966, El Mencho emerged from a farming family of 6 siblings, and despite this background, he diverged early, seeking a more ambitious and nefarious path to success, one marked by the stain of cocaine and the blood of Mexicans. El Mencho's criminal journey began at 14, performing menial tasks for larger cartels, and then in the US, where he continued his criminal pursuits. However, he was deported to Mexico after a Texas-based gang-related sentence. Now, upon his return, El Mencho joined the Milenio Cartel as an assassin. However, the cartel's subsequent fragmentation led him to ally with the Sinaloa cartel subgroup under Ignacio Nacho Coronel. Here, he managed drug operations, finances, and violence in the Mexican states of Colima and Jalisco. But after a few more years, he took charge of half the group, renaming it Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, or the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. With El Mencho at the helm, the CJNG evolved into one of the globe's most violent criminal entities, donning military-grade equipment that could be mistaken for official Mexican military units. They're bad, they're cruel, and they're not to be messed with. So what exactly did Fofo do to piss off this extremely powerful and corrupt organization? Just like almost every TikToker out there, subjected to posting daily videos to keep their followers entertained, Fofo was doing the same. But this time he decided to do something not many have kinda done in Mexico. So, on July 7th, 2022, Fofo took 3 luxury cars and parked them right in the middle of the Matute Remus Bridge in Guadalajara, Mexico. He came down from one of the cars and began filming the traffic that was building up right behind him. He said things like, "We've closed it for ourselves. This is what I want to demonstrate, what money and power can do. Literally, I closed it here because I wanted to. Illuminati." He went on to brag about how he had shut down the bridge for several minutes and how all the other cars were honking. He even contemplated doing a few TikTok dances while innocent people were denied access through that bridge. Fofo posted that on TikTok, and it didn't take long for that video to go viral. A lot of people online shared their disgust at Fofo, raining insults on him for his nonchalance and stupidity. One Twitter user even called him a headless imbecile. The mayor of Guadalajara also threatened to press charges against him, with TikTok officially banning his account while they took down that video. In less than 48 hours, Fofo couldn't access his account anymore and resorted to other platforms to tender his apology. He apologized for his childish behavior and asked for forgiveness from the people affected. The mayor accepted Fofo's apology, but stated that he needed to complete several hours of community service, cleaning beneath that same bridge he blocked. Left with no option, Fofo agreed to do as he was asked, but it was at this moment that the CJNG decided to punish Fofo for his actions. Just when the smoke for his stupid video had gone down, the CJNG reignited the entire case with a message sent to Fofo Marquez. The message went viral on social media, and it was from an anonymous account named Gente con la Gente NG, which translates to people with the new generation. The message was also written in Spanish, but it roughly translates to this. Hello to all the people of Guadalajara. We are the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. As you might know, the influencer or scumbag Fofo Marquez dared to obstruct the flow of traffic on the Matute-Rimus Bridge, which is an act that we don't tolerate. We'll not allow this animal to get away with this. We are in charge of Jalisco and all of Mexico. We would not allow you to come to Guadalajara and do this type of thing. If you ever step in Guadalajara, not you or your money would save you from us. Now, seeing how El Mencho and the CJNG as a whole are driven by intense violence, it could have been anyone who wrote that message to Fofo. Members of the CJNG believe that El Mencho should be feared and worshipped by Mexicans, so Fofo pulling such a stunt in a town under the direct control of El Mencho himself was an insult to El Mencho and his authority. Fofo's undoubtedly wealthy, but where his wealth stops is where that of the CJNG begins. These guys rake in billions of dollars annually and control a significant portion of the Mexican government. Their message terrified Fofo, because he knew that no one could protect him if the CJNG decided to actually kill him. Once the message circulated, things got real. The CJNG doesn't make jokes, and Fofo knew this. He tendered an apology to him online and immediately ran back to his parents' mansion in Mexico to seek refuge. But being in that mansion wouldn't change anything. The family then hired armed security men to guard the house 24/7. But even with this, Fofo wasn't safe. The CJNG had taken down the deadliest cartel hitman squads and even the battalions of the Mexican army in the past, so no amount of security could hold them down. Fofo was scared. He couldn't leave the house for days, stayed away from windows to avoid sniper attacks, and even carried a transceiver around so he could communicate if he was ever in danger. After a few months, Fofo finally returned to his life, but his actions against the authority of the CJNG altered the course of his life till today. However, as crazy as that sounds, this next teenager had the guts to insult El Mencho directly.
Mira bien, hijo de tu puta perra madre. A mí me pela la verga el Mencho aquí. Yo lo digo fuera en cámaras o aquí, cabrón. Así que a mí me pela la madre el Mencho.
Very strong words, right? Well, those were the words of a guy known simply by his TikTok handle, Illuminati6. Before his account became private, he engaged his followers by accepting the dares they gave to him. And on that occasion, one user dared him to insult El Mencho, which he did. In the video, the TikToker wore a slacked black round neck and a black ripped pair of jeans and was carrying a backpack. He leaned on a light pole and said,
"Listen well, you son of a bitch. El Mencho can suck my dick."
He then says,
"I don't sleep like El Pirata or El Chanito de Coyacan,"
referencing two other social media teenagers that had been executed by El Mencho. He finished off the video by saying,
"I'm immortal, untouchable. I made a pact with the devil. I came to give you fire, Mencho. I'm not scared to say this. I'll say this with the camera right here. Mencho can suck my dick."
Wow. I mean, you have to applaud the guts of this little young man who felt he could insult El Mencho. When that video went viral on Reddit and Twitter, a lot of people felt he must have been a member of the cartel to have such confidence in those words, while showing his face in the process. Different users said things like,
"R.I.P. in advance." This guy's going to get himself killed. And this is a tutorial on how to disappear.
But for some reason, no word was heard from El Mencho or even the CJNG. Some rumors said that the teen wasn't based in Mexico and that's why it wouldn't be easy for the CJNG to get to him. It was reported that he lived in Richmond, California, making it hard for the CJNG to even attack him even if they wanted to. Plus, it would have been an attack on foreign land, further complicating things for their organization, so the CJNG didn't respond. But there was a twist. A few days later, this teen uploaded another video apologizing to El Mencho for his words. He said, "I'm sorry for what I said. I wasn't well. I wasn't conscious of what I was saying. It was wrong. That day I woke up stupid. I didn't look at the consequences. I did that for followers. I ask for forgiveness. You and your family are well liked. Mencho, don't kill me. I have a family just like you. I apologize. We all make mistakes. I have psychological problems, sir. Just remember, we like you." The internet went crazy with this apology video dropping, because that was the same guy that had so much to say to El Mencho just a few days before. People started to wonder whether or not El Mencho made a personal threat to the teenager without everyone else knowing, or did he just snap out of his little TikTok fantasy to realize who the heck he was talking to. And while we never got to know what happened behind the scenes, this TikToker just vanished, and his account was made private. There was a video of him posting on another TikTok account some weeks later, but apart from that, no one can say for certain what happened to this guy. So do you think El Mencho killed him off silently? I mean, maybe he did. Who knows? Juan Luis, hailing from Mexico, gained internet fame under the alias El Pirata de Culiacán, translating to Pirate of Culiacán. Born in Sinaloa, Juan's upbringing was marked by hardship. His father's absence and his mother's limited work opportunities left him in the care of his grandmother, who could only do so much. Now, interestingly, his childhood neighborhood was situated just a few kilometers away from the domain of the renowned Mexican drug lord, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. However, Juan's path had yet to intersect with the world of narcotics until he opted to abandon high school and pursue a better life in Culiacán. Upon arriving in Culiacán, Juan took on various low-paying jobs to sustain himself, but concurrently he developed an unhealthy affinity for alcohol. This habit of drinking permeated his work and leisure time, regardless of his underage status. And we all know nothing good comes from consuming way too much alcohol, but for Juan, it kinda did. His problematic relationship with alcohol propelled him to prominence. He established a YouTube channel where he uploaded videos of himself consuming copious amounts of whiskey and beer, followed by his reaction to becoming intoxicated. While it might have seemed unconventional, these videos garnered an unexpectedly massive number of views and reactions from the audience, and adding an element of humor to his content contributed to his rapid rise. His Facebook page amassed over 1 million followers, while his Instagram had around 300,000. Remarkably, his popularity led to appearances in music videos and television shows. But again, nothing good comes from consuming way too much alcohol. And Juan's sudden fame took a drastic turn for the worst. He started posting images on his gram that didn't sit well with the older demographic because he was just 17 years old at the time. These photos depicted him with firearms, luxurious automobiles, and often scantily clad attractive women, and although everyone thought he landed himself with the evil underworld of Mexican narcotics, he wasn't affiliated with any cartels, at least not yet. Instead, a meeting with Beto Sierra, a social media management expert, marked a turning point for El Pirata. Sierra's guidance encouraged him to transition away from that alcohol-centric content and embrace more marketable ventures, such as unveiling his own merch and even attempting a singing career. However, Juan remained like a ticking time bomb, and his fate was sealed sooner than anticipated. On multiple occasions, Juan openly expressed his defiance towards numerous adversaries, including a drunken video in which he provocatively insulted Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes. What's his name, everybody? El Mencho. He uttered these exact words,
El Mencho a mí me pela la verga,
which carried a bold confrontational meaning in English, loosely translating to
El Mencho, peel my dick.
I mean, I really don't get why these guys put themselves in harm's way, knowing how dangerous El Mencho is. Not even El Chapo's cartel dares to provoke CJNG, and we know it's because of their extreme levels of brutality and violence. Yet these teenagers, maybe for a few likes or the eagerness to go viral on social media, see the need to call out a man that kills humans like flies. In response, a fair CJNG issued a stern warning for Juan to avoid stepping foot in Jalisco if he wanted to remain alive. But Juan didn't care. He went ahead to host a party with his friends at a Jalisco bar, and that was the moment CJNG sicarios sent them on an immediate journey to the afterlife. December 18th, 2017. Armed men stormed the bar where Juan was celebrating, and with a hail of over 18 bullets from high-caliber firearms, his life was abruptly extinguished in less than a minute. The numerous wounds inflicted made it so hard to even recognize that body. He was later identified by the tattoos on his arms. His death, rather than his life, became the subject of a feature in Rolling Stone magazine, focusing on his demise at the hands of CJNG, and of course the stupidity of challenging one of the most wanted men in the world. But also with his death, El Chanito de Culiacan, another Mexican teenager, saw it as a medium to gain clout. With the death of El Pirata, El Chanito decided to call out El Mencho, saying he was out to seek revenge for the death of his friend. The viral video showed El Chanito holding a rifle along with a small child whose face was covered, also wielding a rifle, while they cursed out El Mencho. They called El Mencho words like stupid and even mocked El Pirata for consuming so much alcohol just for content and internet fame. I mean, you don't need us to tell you that this statement obviously led to El Chanito's death. But for El Chanito, the CJNG decided to take things to the next level. El Chanito apologized for his statement to El Mencho and played the insanity card, claiming to be mentally ill. But this didn't stop the CJNG. El Chanito went off social media for a while, and everyone suspected he had been killed. But the real confirmation of his death came when an anonymous Redditor posted a video of him being beheaded by CJNG sicarios. The footage was immediately taken down for its graphic content, but the message had been passed: do not mess with El Mencho. Leslie Ann was a Mexican social media influencer who gained fame as a TikToker, YouTuber, and celebrity. Sadly, she met a tragic end due to her decision to reveal intricate details about a notorious cartel in Mexico. Known by her online persona, Nana Pelucas, Leslie engaged her audience with videos ranging from politics and makeup tutorials to daily vlogs about her life. Her online presence took a unique twist when she adopted the persona of a lady donning a black afro wig, bold red lipstick, and oversized glasses. In a manner reminiscent of current TikTok trends, she would amusingly interact with people in supermarkets, asking them trivia questions to get their reactions. Now, as time went on, Leslie's following expanded, prompting her to shift her content towards exposing corrupt officials within the Mexican government. Leslie didn't outrightly call out names. Instead, she skillfully conveyed her message through humor, though its impact remained unmistakable and stirred up considerable controversy. Of course, one might think that exercising freedom of speech would carry no harm, but in Mexico, that reality is a bit different. The journey towards her tragic fate began when she started shedding light on the activities of the enigmatic independent cartel of Acapulco, one of Mexico's most secretive criminal organizations. This particular cartel operated stealthily, often overlooked due to its clandestine nature. They played a massive role in the hundreds of homicides carried out within the town of Acapulco, and were one of the many smaller groups in the area. Returning to Leslie's narrative, her publicizing of the cartel's actions exposed her to death threats. Banners accusing her of collaborating with rival cartels to unveil the independent cartel's secrets and deliver them to the Mexican government began appearing around her restaurants. In response, Leslie vehemently denied these allegations, asserting that her information stemmed from reliable sources and that she had no affiliations with any cartels. Despite these threats, she remained resolute, continuing her postings and exposing the cartel's activities, which turned her into a genuine threat to their operations. February 5th, 2018. Two men entered her restaurant during her night shift. ordering beers, before mercilessly gunning her down. She received 3 shots to the upper body, ending her life on the spot. Fortunately, Mexican authorities managed to apprehend one of the individuals responsible for her murder, El Pipas. The subsequent trial, however, took a perplexing turn. The presiding judge inexplicably dismissed the charges against El Pipas, despite an abundance of undeniable evidence. This unsettling outcome starkly illustrated the deep-rooted corruption that Leslie had fought against. Cartels manipulated the judicial system, even influencing high-ranking government officials, and copying instances like El Chapo's daring prison escapes. Leslie's demise inadvertently led foreign entities to investigate the Acapulco cartel's affairs, eventually revealing the city's perilous state. The town itself made the ranking for being the world's second most dangerous city. The United States even issued a special travel ban to dissuade its citizens from visiting the city of Acapulco. Leslie's hope of exposing the city's issues to both the public and the Mexican government aimed for change, yet she tragically underestimated the extent of corruption. So in her pursuit of justice, Leslie messed with these cartel members and paid for it with her life. That, my friends, is something that won't be forgotten in a hurry.
Earlier this week, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel posted a video online in which they directly threatened Rusty.
TikToker and newscaster Azucena has also managed to imprint her name amongst those in the bad books of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. In August 2021, Miss Uresti became a target of the CJNG after they released a message calling her biased and a supporter of vigilante groups in Mexico. Miss Uresti is majorly involved with the press, and as of now, what seems to be her TikTok account has been made private. In the video released by the CJNG, 6 sicarios were dressed in black clothing and carried automated weapons, while a 7th man who said he was a representative of El Mencho sat down and delivered his message to Miss Uresti. The spokesperson said, "I'm not against freedom of expression, but I am against anyone that attacks me." He went on to talk about how the cartel would find and kill Miss Uresti for spoiling the name of their organization. According to their side of the story, the vigilante groups Miss Uresti claims are peacemakers in Mexico are in reality drug traffickers in disguise. These vigilante groups have undergone countless attacks on different cartels to paint themselves as heroes to the Mexican government. However, the CJNG believes they're just another deadbeat group, looking to eat from the spoils of the Mexican narcotics underworld. They also claim that only a cartel would yield that type of ammunition these vigilant groups possess. However, Miss Uresti's life became a national treasure because after the CJNG's video went viral, the Mexican president, Obrador, assured the country that nothing was going to happen to any Mexican or even Miss Uresti for speaking the truth. In his statement, he said, "It's our responsibility that Mexicans are not intimidated or threatened by anyone." The presidential spokesperson, Jesus Ramirez Cuevas, tweeted a post about the incident, saying the government would take the necessary measures to protect any member of the press from speaking their mind. Then Miss Uresti spoke for herself, saying that she was now under the protection of the government and didn't seem bothered by the statement from CJNG. Since then, Miss Uresti has been living her life and there have been no attacks against her. It could be that the CJNG had decided to let her be, or they could be waiting for the perfect time to strike. Either way, journalism is a tough job in Mexico, and I don't see why Miss Uresti should blindly put her faith in a government that has sat back and watched hundreds of journalists before her die at the hands of different cartels. So maybe Uresti is the only TikToker and social media personality to mess with a cartel and get away with it. Maybe she'll still pay the price. Mexican megastar Peso Pluma was on stage performing during the 2-day-long music festival in the nation's capital. However, during his performance, he held the mic towards the Mexico City crowd of an estimated 100,000 people as they sang the initials JGL in unison. This was a reference to Joaquin Guzman Lora, alias El Chapo. Pluma's homage to the incarcerated drug lord El Chapo may not have held significant meaning for him, but to the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, it resonated deeply, and they vowed to exact retribution. June 15, 1999. Pluma, real name Hassan Emilio Cabandelaya, was born in the municipality of Zapopan, Jalisco, Mexico. Keep in mind that the state of Jalisco is home to the CJNG. But unlike other teenagers his age, Peso Pluma never got involved with cartels, at least not yet. He began playing the guitar at the age of 15, watching YouTube videos. Then later on, he started writing songs in a diary. He found inspiration for his songs in the work of Chalino Sanchez and Ariel Camacho, two singers of narco corridos, which tell stories about the Mexican drug trade. If there's one thing you should know about the narco corridos genre of music, it's that the singers often become targets of high-profile drug lords, especially when an artist glorifies their enemies. But being born in and around violence, Peso wasn't about to get himself trapped in the middle of any animosity, so he found his own sound and had a major breakthrough across the borders of Mexico in July 2022. Genesis, his third studio album, made its debut on the Billboard All-Genre Album chart at number 3, the highest position ever for an album of regional Mexican music, along with getting billions of streams on Spotify. Pretty impressive, right? Well, yeah, but at the same time, Peso Pluma glorified El Chapo in a few songs, and it got him into a lot of trouble. In the song Siempre Pendientes, which translates to Always Ready, Pluma sings in first-person style about the life of a Sinaloa cartel member who guards El Chapo. This didn't sit well with the CJNG, who felt Pluma was using his rapid rise in the music industry to glorify their #1 rival. So, they decided to send a warning. September 12, 2023. 4 banners were placed over bridges in the city of Tijuana, warning Peso Pluma to cancel his upcoming concert in the city on October 14th. They further stated on the banners that if he didn't, it would be his last because of his disrespectful tongue. All banners were signed by the CJNG, pointing to the fact that the message came from him. Now at the time, Peso Pluma was in the US rehearsing for his MTV Video Music Award performance the following day. But if we're being honest, Peso Pluma isn't the first artist to sing about El Chapo, so what makes him an enemy of the CJNG? Well, for starters, Peso is one of the biggest Mexican artists right now. He's got over 11 million followers on Instagram, and his songs are now a favorite amongst Americans and the Western world. On the other hand, Tijuana has been a major place of conflict for cartels. The city near the border and its nearby areas have been disputed territories for a long time. They're often called plazas when talking about which criminal cartels control them in Mexico. The modern drug wars in the city began in the late 80s and 90s, when the Guadalajara cartel split, leading to groups led by El Chapo and Ismael El Mayo Zambada in Sinaloa, and the Arellano Felix family in Tijuana. Power in Tijuana shifted between different factions that emerged from these initial groups over the years. Recently, other criminal groups have also moved into the region, with the CJNG being one of the most prominent. To put it into context, Tijuana consistently has one of the highest homicide rates in the country, as various criminal organizations continue to vie for control. Now, what this simply means is that Peso Pluma holding a concert in this city while paying homage to El Chapo and the Sinaloa cartel in his songs would be undermining the CJNG's power in the city. Besides, Pluma is also from Jalisco, where the CJNG takes its name, so they probably believe the name El Mencho should be on his lips instead of Chapo. However, Peso Pluma has refused to address the reason why he honors El Chapo and the Sinaloa cartel in his songs. He even hung up on a call on an LA Times reporter who once asked. Eventually, Peso Pluma and his team had to cancel the Tijuana show as a way to ensure his safety. We've seen the execution of the CJNG. These guys don't bluff when they issue threats like that. Earlier in 2023, a narco corrido band from Sinaloa State called Grupo Arriesgado was at a Tijuana mall signing autographs ahead of a planned concert when gunmen fired shots near the crowd. A banner signed by the Jalisco cartel was left at the scene, warning the band to leave the city or suffer the consequences. At the end of the day, Peso Pluma won't be the first, and he certainly won't be the last to receive such a warning from the extremely dangerous cartel. Now the question is, what are the odds the CJNG won't orchestrate an attack on him if he performs in a different Mexican state? That was the iconic Chalino Sanchez reading the death note handed to him during his last performance in Mexico. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and looked around him in fear of what was to come next. Chalino was obviously not a rapper, he was a singer and a musical icon in Mexico. However, his genre of music and his life leading up to his death is by far one of the most bone-chilling stories you'll hear today. I promise you. August 30th, 1960 marked the birth of Chalino in Sinaloa, Mexico. He came from a very poor background as he lived with both his parents, his 7 brothers, and his only sister. He was also a very mischievous child and did a lot of bad things to survive. In 1975, when Chalino was just 15, his sister was kidnapped, raped, and then sent home naked by several men. Chalino swore to seek revenge for his sister. He knew that a local man named El Chapo Perez was one of those responsible. 4 years later, his opportunity for retribution arrived. He was at a party when he saw Perez carrying a gun. He approached him and shot him at very close range, instantly ending his life. A gunfight erupted and Chalino managed to escape. However, Perez's men saw his face, so he couldn't go back home. Chalino ran away from Sinaloa that night, but by morning, the troubles that would eventually lead to his death began. He moved to Tijuana, where he was helping Mexicans cross into the US. Eventually, Chalino himself would cross over and move to LA, where he dealt with small quantities of marijuana and cocaine with one of his brothers. However, by the time he moved back to Mexico, his brother was killed. He was arrested and jailed for about 18 months. But listen closely, because this is when Chalino began writing narco corrido songs, glorifying the life of drug traffickers. Controversial? Yeah, but at the time, no other artist was doing it, so it made Chalino very famous. Once he got out of jail, he traveled back to LA. He hired a band to record his music and went on to play live at packed venues in the city. In 1989, Chalino recorded his first 15 songs and revolutionized the music scene in LA and Mexico. He was making millions of dollars, selling out shows all around Mexico. But one show in particular made Chalino realize his days may be running out. January 25th, 1992, Sanchez was performing at the Plaza Los Arcos restaurant and nightclub in the desert city of Coachella. While on stage, he was taking song requests from the audience when a man named Eduardo Gallegos climbed up and made a request. Immediately when he got on stage, he took out his pistol and shot Chalino 4 times. Chalino in turn pulled out his pistol and shot back. Took a hit to the armpit, however, he survived. But from that moment on, he knew that any show he did next could be his last. Due to the Coachella incident, Chalino sold the rights to his music to a record label, using the money for a down payment on a house for his wife and 2 kids. To complete the payment for the house and to leave his family with a fortune in case anything happened to him, Chalino accepted a gig to perform in the dreaded city of Culiacan. If you didn't already know, Culiacan's home to the Sinaloa Cartel. They control every corner and every street. Chalino knew it was a dangerous move to perform there, considering his type of music. However, he was ready to step into the belly of the beast, as long as his family would be safe. Sadly, he would not survive. May 15th, 1992. Despite warnings from his family, friends, and even death threats, Chalino went on to perform at Salon Bougainvilleas in Culiacan. In what seemed like deja vu, a fan pushed their way to the front of the stage to hand Chalino a song request. But from the look on his face, it was not a request, but a message informing him that his performance there would be his last. You can see the fear on his face the moment he read that note. Regardless, he continued singing. After the show, he left with his 2 brothers, a cousin, and several young women. On their way home, they would be stopped by armed men in Chevrolet Suburbans claiming to be police. One of the men flashed his badge and said to Chalino, "My comandante needs you." Chalino and his brothers tried to offer the men money since it wasn't uncommon for Mexican police to accept bribes. Unfortunately, they refused the offer. Chalino gave himself up to the men and they sped off with him. 12 hours later, 2 farmers stumble across a man in a ditch with rope marks around his wrists and 2 bullet holes in the back of his head. It was Chalino Sanchez, but who killed him? An investigation would be carried out, but nothing would turn up. The massive corruption in Mexico likely played a role in the unsolved mystery, but according to close sources, there are 3 main suspects to hold responsible. First, we have El Chapo Perez's associates, seeking retribution for a past murder that had forced Chalino to flee Mexico. Second, we have Mr. Gallegos, the individual who shot Chalino at Coachella. And lastly, there's the Sinaloa Cartel. It's likely the first two had cartel connections and arranged for his death. However, it's unconfirmed. Also, because Chalino took commissions from actual cartel members, it is possible the Sinaloa Cartel saw Chalino as a tool for other cartels and took him out. April 19, 2018. The body of 42-year-old Mexican rapper Mr. Yosie Locote was dumped in an empty lot in the western city of Guadalajara. A screwdriver was stabbed into his chest with a note from the cartel that orchestrated his death, the CJNG. Now this guy over here got in trouble with an extremely dangerous cartel without even being Mexican. He was born in the U.S. on January 20th, 1976 in Bakersfield, California. However, along the line, Mr. Locote found himself in the city of Guadalajara, Mexico, where he joined a street gang and also delved into rap. My Mexican friends in the building would definitely know his two iconic songs, Palazos and Esto es en serio. Now these were the songs that put him on the map as one of the biggest rappers in the country. He was an OG in the game. He rapped about his experiences on the street in a very honest way, kind of like Mexico's Snoop Dogg. And I mean that in a very good way. But the biggest mistake he would make during his life is associating himself with one of the CJNG's biggest enemies. And no, it was not El Chapo or the Sinaloa Cartel. It was the hardened criminal and drug lord El Cholo. Now before I say anything else, I want you to really understand something here. Mexican street gangs, mafiosos, and cartels all operate different corners of the criminal underworld. They may come across a dealing or two, but they're all separate entities, and they barely cross each other's boundaries. However, when they do, things get heated, and people die. And that's exactly how Mr. Yosie Locote found himself killed. Now, he was a member of LA street gang Florence 13. They would soil their hands in white powder drug smuggling, and with the blood of hundreds of murders they've orchestrated. And although the gang operated in LA, a Mexican chapter was established after the US launched Operation Joker's Wild, deporting hundreds of these gang members back to Mexico and indicting a lot more federal charges. Mr. Yosie Locote was a high-ranking member of Florence 13. Despite being a hip-hop star, he aligned himself with another group called the Sureños, a Southern California gang linked to the Mexican Mafia. They would flaunt blue bandanas associated with the Sureño gangs and adopted what is known as the Cholo dress code, which involves carrying shaved heads and wearing baggy tees. However, as I explained, the cartels don't necessarily bother themselves with the affairs of street gangs. But after US rap label Circulo Asesino signed Mr. Yosie Locote, and he released his first album in 2012 titled 13 Hood Rules, things would fire up. The Florence 13 fought to gain more territory in Guadalajara, and at the same time the CJNG were relatively new to the city. Now these guys were behind massacres. They had deadly ambushes of security forces, and even rocket launcher attacks on several military choppers. But the one thing that CJNG did to calm the storm was kidnap Mr. Yosie Locote April 17, 2018, 2 days before his lifeless body was found. Mr. Yosie Locote was kidnapped from a local market in Guadalajara. His kidnap was orchestrated by the CJNG, and as much as I hate to say it, that was a very calculated move from the cartel. They knew one of the major reasons behind the sudden rise of the street gang in the city was because of Mr. Locote's influence in the area. So if he was gone, there'd be nobody for his associates to look up to, making it easier for them to come in and sweep the gang out. And in typical CJNG style, they wouldn't just shoot a bullet straight to his head. They would hold him down while mercilessly stabbing him to death with a screwdriver. As painful as that might have been, they didn't stop there. They left a note, like they always do. But this one read, "This is gonna happen to all those who keep supporting Cholo." While fans demanded justice, no one has been charged with this murder. And although the death of Mr. Yosie Locote sparked domestic media interest, it'd be nothing compared to the storm of global attention that stirred the following week with the arrest of another rapper named QBA. One golden rule all CJNG members are compelled to follow is to never, and I mean never, snitch on the affairs of the organization. April 22, 2018. QBA indirectly put a huge target on his back by flaunting this golden rule. After divulging classified information to Mexican authorities on some of his affairs and dealings with the cartel. Now you see, 24-year-old Christian Palma, known as QBA, was a famous rapper to the public, but behind closed doors, he was nothing more than El Mencho's puppet. He and Mr. Yosie Lacote, whom we talked about earlier, were the pioneers of rap malandro, or thug rap, which in my opinion is a soundtrack used for the country's drug war. His YouTube channel had over 200,000 subscribers and millions of views. On the other side, his videos weren't really what you'd expect from a mainstream artist. The videos were shot in poor neighborhoods of Guadalajara, the state capital of Jalisco, and featured the youth brandishing guns and taking drugs. Some of his lyrics talked about meth and different massacres from the cartel, marking QBA's first steps into the CJNG's bad books. March 19, 2018, 3 film students, Javier Salomon, Daniel Diaz, and Marco Avalos, were kidnapped from the town of Tonalá in western Jalisco state. These 3 students were filming at a ranch belonging to the CJNG, leading QBA and 2 other CJNG members mistaking them as members of a rival cartel. After the missing persons report of these 3 students came out, the entire nation was outraged. It was Mexico v. the CJNG. Meanwhile, in the camp of the cartel, QBA and his men were still under the assumption that these guys were rival cartel members. They tortured one of them, Javier Salomon, and after that, they had no other option than to kill off the rest. In a normal scenario, these guys would have dropped off the bodies on a random street, but seeing how outraged Mexicans had gotten over the case, they decided to melt off the bodies in sulfuric acid, and QBA was the man for the job. You see, QBA was paid about $150 a week by the CJNG to melt dead bodies in acid. And I know what you're thinking, if he was a rapper, wasn't he supposed to be making way more than that? Well, while it did seem like that on the outside, that wasn't really the case. His label was taking a huge chunk of his earnings, leaving him with crumbs. So it's safe to say he was practically broke. But anyway, none of that really mattered. It was after his arrest and confession that QBA got himself into a lot of trouble. So, what exactly did he say? In his confession, he detailed his link to the CJNG through the infamous street gang Infernus 21. However, after the gang disbanded, he joined the cartel. In some lyrics to his songs, he glorified crystal meth, crack, and other inhalants. That was his way of paying homage to the CJNG for being at the top of the meth market in Mexico. Now, during his confession, QBA gave a full account of the CJNG's meth production, from smuggling chemicals through Mexico's seaports to cooking the final product in clandestine labs. Now, why would he do this? Or here's a better question. Why would he reveal it when he knows fully well they would stop at nothing to kill him? Well, some say it's because they allegedly killed one of his closest friends, Luis Sebo Estrada, the previous year. But regardless, QBA should have known better. The CJNG as a criminal organization is unstoppable. Not the Mexican government, not the DEA, and certainly not QBA's confession can shake the foundation of this cartel's operations. He just sold himself out to the cops who might throw him back into the hands of the cartel. Except, he had an alternate plan. After his arrest and alleged confession, many rappers had released tracks to celebrate him. The most popular of these was Free QBA by A.B. Perez, another rapper who was himself arrested on a double murder charge in July 2018. QBA is now seen as the messiah of hip-hop in Mexico. He has set an example with himself that not the cartel nor the Mexican government can take away his truth. Right now, he's at Guadalajara's Puente Grande prison, where he could face the max penalty of 140 years. But is he really safe behind bars, or will they orchestrate an attack from the inside? Well, I guess we have to wait and find out. September 2nd, 2023. Famous Mexican rapper Lefty SM was murdered by 3 gunmen in his home located in Jalisco, Mexico. Some say it was a robbery gone wrong, but according to his wife, she thinks it was a planned attack. So what exactly happened? Born on April 22, 1992 in San Luis Rio, Colorado, Mexico, Lefty SM's journey into the music world began at an early age. His nickname Lefty was affectionately given by his close friends due to his left-handedness. He started pursuing music at the age of 16, all while maintaining his day job as a mechanic. His early work would showcase a strict hip-hop sound with slow G-funk beats. It was pretty dope, and it drew influences from various genres, creating a unique and versatile style, allowing him to seamlessly switch between delivering unrestrained bars and crooning soulfully. This unique style of his led him to sign with renowned label Alzada Records. It was a massive one for him, but was also the beginning of his end. A prominent figure in Mexico's urban rap scene, Lefty SM gained international recognition through YouTube, amassing 2.5 million followers after his launch in 2017. His debut album, Avión de Papel, released in 2019, also showcased more of his talent. He would follow that up with a patriotic single, Por Mi Mexico, a collaboration with Santa Fe Clan the following year. Lefty also collaborated with rap heavyweights like Neto Peña, Guerra MX, MC Davo, Toser One, Darius, and Hambi Alfavo. He was arguably Mexico's biggest rapper until the tragic incident occurred. September 2nd, 2023, Lefty and his wife Isa Mary were lying in bed when 3 armed assailants broke in and attempted to forcibly remove him from his home. Unable to do so, they resorted to violence, opening fire and fleeing the scene. Lefty was shot twice, rushed to the hospital, but died from his injuries at approximately 1:15 a.m. His final performance, just the night prior, at Teatro Metropolitan in Mexico City, now stands as a haunting memory for all his fans. So, who's responsible? I'd be lying to you if I said I was 100% sure the armed men were cartel sicarios, but at the same time, many suggest it was CJNG members, being that Lefty lived in their city. But more recently, it's been said that his closest friends suggest it was a guy named L.O.V. who wanted him dead. L.O.V. said to have some cartel connections, so all fingers still point to the CJNG. But whether or not they had a hand in his murder, Lefty SM would be remembered for his legacy in the Mexican rap scene for generations to come.
And speaking out on behalf of victims of sexual violence in Colombia, all women and girls are in your debt.
That was Jeanette Bedoya Lima, receiving an award for her bravery as an investigative journalist in Colombia. But that's just one side of her story. The other one entails her getting kidnapped, raped, and tortured, not once, but twice. In 2000, the first time this happened was when 26-year-old Lima worked alongside Ignacio Gomez, another investigative journalist at the Bogotá daily newspaper. Lima at the time was covering a very crucial story on the Colombian war against terrorism, while investigating a story on arms trafficking by both state officials and the paramilitary group called the United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia. As she was covering that story, she had received an invitation from a convicted killer simply known as the Baker. He wanted to meet with Lima and give her all the information she needed at the infamous La Modelo prison near Bogotá. She went with an editor and a photographer, but when they arrived, things got hazy. Both the photographer and the editor mindlessly stepped out for a few minutes while they awaited clearance from prison wards to enter the facility. But by the time they got back, Lima was gone. No screams were heard, no signs of struggle, and certainly no eyewitnesses willing to speak. Lima later revealed that she was approached by a man with a scar over one eye, who wore shiny shoes and also shoved a gun right below her waist. He took her out of the prison facility through another exit while prison wardens watched remorselessly. Then a mysterious group of men beat her to a pulp and violated her sexually while repeating the words,
"Pay attention, we're sending a message to the press in Colombia."
When they were done, they threw her semi-conscious body into a dump pile beside the road. But by evening that day, she was discovered by a taxi driver who immediately drove her to the hospital. Lima barely survived that attack, and you'd think she'd quit or run away like any normal person would, right? Well, not Lima. Just like the words of Vincent van Gogh, Lima had put her heart and soul into her work, and she had lost her mind in the process. She didn't quit. Instead, she went harder on her quest to uncover the truth. Sadly, it led to another kidnapping, and this time, they went harder on her. In 2001, a year after the incident, Lima was hired by El Tiempo, a Colombian newspaper, and was put in charge of its law enforcement coverage, including reporting on the war between FARC guerrillas, the paramilitary group, the armed forces, and the Colombian government. Before this, though, Lima had received international recognition in the US for her unwavering commitment to her job. This recognition also played a positive role in her career. It served as a bit of protection for Lima from more violence. She had received a telegram from the boss of the paramilitary forces saying she had nothing to fear from them. The FARC guerrilla chiefs gave her similar assurances, but it was simply bait to lure her into another trap. August 2003, she traveled to the town of Puerto Alvira to report on how it had been captured and held by the FARC guerrillas for more than a year, forcing its 1,100 inhabitants into full-time cocaine production. When they arrived, an FARC guerrilla leader instructed their kidnapping and took away their cameras, cell phones, and clothes. The leader also ordered the people not to speak to or feed him. However, they defied his rules. They not only gave him food, but also tried getting him help after they heard that the leader was planning to kill him. Once again, though, Lima cheated the hands of death after a senior FARC commander was alerted of the situation. He immediately got her released, apologizing on behalf of the leader who ordered that kidnapping in the first place. Lima had become a household name in Colombia, and messing with her wouldn't have been just a national issue, but an issue that would have definitely brought questions from international organizations. This is partly the reason why Lima is still alive today. Aside from the fact that the drug trafficking scene in Colombia is slowly deteriorating, Lima has claimed so many awards and international recognition for her job that she's regarded as the face of journalism in Colombia. But this next journalist on our countdown is regarded as her Mexican counterpart.
The most powerful men in the government want to kill me because I reveal in my book that he was in the payroll of the Sinaloa cartel.
In 2010, there were a lot of people that wanted Anabel dead. The Sinaloa cartel, the Mexican government, and a faction of the US government, all because of a book she wrote that exposed their dealings in detail. She became wanted in Mexico and had to flee the country with her family. But this wasn't the life she always wanted for herself. Born in 1971, Anabel dreamt of being a lawyer as a kid. However, that dream couldn't come to fruition after she noticed the bias in Mexico's news reports on the drug war. A lot of killings were going on in different states, but far less were being reported. Reporters and journalists shied away from these types of stories in order not to get killed. But not Anabel. At just 21 years old, she started her own newspaper called Reforma. She was still in school at the time, and her first front-page story was about electoral fraud in Mexico City. It was a powerful one, grabbing the attention of many. 3 years later, Anabel was pregnant with her first child, and ultimately her work got the attention of the Mexican government. She kept changing jobs because of unofficial reports that the Mexican government tried censoring her work. This didn't stop Anabel, but it landed her in a lot of trouble. December 5th, 2000. Anabel received a phone call from her mother telling her that her father hadn't come home the night before. Anabel and her family members began the search by first calling local hospitals to find out if he'd been brought in. Then they would call a radio station reporting him and his car missing. Immediately after they did this, someone had called back informing them they'd found his car. Anabel's brother went to that given location and found an extremely horrific scene. The car was parked by the roadside, while Mr. Hernandez's shoes were in the trunk. They were stained all over with his blood. By evening, his body was found on a highway outside Mexico City. He was confirmed dead. This man was a victim of Anabel's war on the entire narcotics underworld. The police told the family they'd be willing to investigate this murder if the Hernandez family paid him to do it. At this point, it was obvious Anabel had suffered a loss for pissing off the powers that be. But she wasn't ready to retreat. Rather, she wanted revenge. In 2001, while working with a major newspaper in Mexico, Anabel exposed a story about how the winning Mexican presidential candidate at the time, Vicente Fox, used public funds extravagantly to decorate his personal space. This was despite his campaign promises of economic austerity. The newspaper revealed expense reports from President Fox's government, uncovering overcharges, unverified purchases, and connections to non-existent companies. The story gained international recognition and even earned Anabel an award. But she wouldn't stop here either. In 2010, she dropped a book that exposed in grave detail the relationship between the cartels, El Chapo, the Mexican government, and the United States. The book took 5 years of research and was titled Los Señores del Narco, or Narcoland, the Mexican drug lords and their godfathers. According to this book, Anabel stated that the government, its policies, the military, and the entire financial sector of Mexico are structured in a way that gives power to the cartels and makes drug trafficking possible. She went further, claiming that under President Vicente Fox, the relationship between the cartels and the government changed, as Fox sided with the Sinaloa cartel by letting Joaquin El Chapo Guzman escape prison in 2001. To top it all off, she claimed the DEA had a secret deal with traffickers in the illegal importation of fentanyl and methamphetamine, claiming the agencies make billions of dollars off this trade in the U.S. Anabel was like a one-man army, ready to burn the entire narcotics underworld to the ground. Sadly, they fired back. Anabel received multiple death threats from the government of Mexico itself. One of the officers she specifically exposed, Genaro Garcia Luna, who apparently fooled Mexicans by claiming he'd fight against drug cartels. Meanwhile, he was receiving millions of dollars in bribes from the Sinaloa cartel, tried to assassinate her. He sent his men to her home, but lucky for her, she was out that day and had escaped death. Now, as courageous as she was, Anabel was still human, and she did fear death. This would make her leave Mexico a few months later, and despite all her efforts, the corruption in Mexico still stands. The cartels still reign supreme, but at least she achieved her goal.
I'm glad that I still be alive to be able to publish these stories, because I think that people deserve to know. People need to know what is happening there.
August 9th, 2006. The bruised and lifeless body of Enrique was found outside the city of Chihuahua with 2 gunshots to his head and back. Now, this was his punishment for messing with the infamous Juarez cartel. But they weren't the only ones after him. A faction of the Mexican government also wanted him dead, and you wouldn't even believe the cruel reason why. Now, his journey to becoming wanted by both these groups began when he started his own investigative magazine titled Dos Caras, Una Verdad, which translates to 2 sides, 1 truth. He founded this magazine in 2005 after working 20 years as a crime reporter and investigative journalist. His aim was to uncover the men behind the countless homicides and drugs trafficked in Chihuahua. And you'd really have to commend his boldness, because Chihuahua at that time was one of the worst places to be in Mexico. It was governed by Mexican state officials, but the Juarez cartel had the final say on all affairs. The cartel was responsible for transporting billions of dollars worth of illegal drug shipments into the U.S. Now, at the same time, they were in a battle with the Sinaloa cartel over those borders. This led to countless homicides within and outside the city. This place is also home to some of the most corrupt Mexican cops and officials. I mean, how do you even get tons of cocaine across the border without being stopped? The cartel streamlines millions into the pockets of these officials to keep their mouths shut, and anyone who dared step in their way would find themselves 6 feet under. In simpler terms, Chihuahua was a modern-day Gotham City, and Quintanilla took up the role of Batman, trying to keep that place clean. However, in this version, Batman died. Now, before all this happened, Quintanilla used his magazine to fight for justice. It was strictly crime-related, and it was known for criticizing the Mexican government for those high homicide rates in the state of Chihuahua, particularly the executions between rival drug cartels. He also would write about corrupt officials, unsolved murders, and drug trafficking activities. The implication of this was that he was harassed on multiple occasions. However, just a few days before he was murdered, he exposed photos and documents that gave in sufficient detail government officials involved in the drug trade. It even implicated the then governor of Chihuahua. Jose Reyes Paeza Terrazas. This was the trigger that provoked Quintanilla's death. August 8, 2006. Quintanilla was last seen leaving his office at around 11 a.m., and he would never return home that night. His family reported him missing the next day, and his body was found by Mexican authorities dumped along a roadside the following day. His lifeless body displayed harrowing evidence of torture, marred wounds from a .45 cal pistol to his head and back. Police notice a chilling resemblance, symbolizing an execution style favored by the Juarez cartel. But this theory of theirs was disproved a few years later. October 12, 2012. Mexican media house TV Azteca got a video from an anonymous user showing two naked men with clear signs of having undergone torture, confessing their involvement in the assassination of Quintanilla. The alleged killers, Leopoldo Rodriguez Garcia and Armando Duarte Escobedo, were interrogated by an unseen man heard in the background of the video clip, and they both admitted that they had killed this man on the orders of 3 drug lords of the Juarez cartel. A few weeks later, another video was posted on the Mexican news website El Diario de Chihuahua. In this video, the brother of the Chihuahua State Attorney General, Mario Angel Gonzalez, was seen handcuffed and surrounded by at least 5 masked gunmen carrying assault rifles. After answering some questions, the man confessed that his sister, Patricia Gonzalez, the State Attorney General, had ordered the execution of Quintanilla and Armando Rodriguez Carrion, another journalist. Many people interpreted this as the cartel forcing the real killers to confess to their crimes. They tried pinning his death on the cartel, but they in turn produced the real killers. The only problem was they did it 6 years after his death, and also after a set of gunmen killed one of his sons, Jonathan Perea Cardenas, in 2009. May 15, 2017. Javier was brutally shot 12 times by an unidentified gunman in Culiacan, Sinaloa. His death brought an end to decades of trying to expose the Sinaloa cartel and all its operations. Now the question is, how did it happen? Javier was born on April 14, 1967, in the same city where he was killed. As a teenager, he became real familiar with the violence in the area. We had cocaine, meth, kidnapping, human trafficking, you name it. But unlike every other teenager who felt they didn't have a choice, Javier had the balls to bring them down. He got a degree in sociology from the Autonomous University of Sinaloa, and then got a job as a reporter for the national TV station, Canal 3. And that's when things started getting interesting. He worked with a handful of news stations throughout the 90s, but Javier wasn't satisfied with their level of competence when it came to addressing the affairs of criminal organizations. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they were corrupt, I'm saying they were playing it safe, maybe too safe for Javier. So he would start his own newspaper called Rio 12. Now this publication was a blessing and a curse for Cardenas. You know why? On one hand, he was able to uncover some of the deepest and dirtiest reports on organized crime. On the other, he became a huge target for these criminals. Regardless, he wasn't willing to stop exposing them. He published several books on drug trafficking, including a few that gained international recognition. One that really stood out was Miss Narco, detailing the lives of girlfriends and wives of drug lords, along with disgusting levels of debauchery some of these women face against their will. And just to put into context how dangerous things were for him back then, the former Mexican president, Felipe Calderón, had just resumed office and dispatched around 6,000 Mexican army soldiers to Michoacán and Sinaloa. Their aim? Wipe out corruption. Now this period was by far one of the most intense in Mexico's fight against drug trafficking. The streets were filled with blood, bullets, and dead bodies. More than 14,500 people died in a span of about 3 years. And still with no guns or bodyguards, this man kept digging deep into the works and affairs of the Sinaloa cartel. Until they finally attacked. September 2009, unidentified assailants hurled a grenade into Rio 12's facilities, causing substantial damage to that building. Thankfully, no one was injured, but that attack came as a result of a key publishing Cardenas made less than 24 hours prior. The piece was titled Hitman, Confession of an Assassin in Ciudad Juarez. And believe me when I say the publication caused a huge stir in public opinion. Remarkably, he continued exposing these individuals, and to his surprise, there were no fresh attacks or death threats on his or his family's life until he once again provoked the Sinaloa cartel. In 2011, Javier was awarded the International Press Freedom Award by the Committee to Protect Journalists in New York. In his acceptance speech, he condemned the violence in Mexico and blamed both the citizens and the government for each playing a role in driving the war forward. His speech obviously pissed off the Mexican government, but you know who else it pissed off? That's right, the Sinaloa cartel. And it meant one thing and one thing only. This guy needed to go. May 15th, 2017. Javier was mercilessly shot 12 times by an unidentified gunman around noon, just a few blocks away from his office in Culiacan, Sinaloa. The Mexican authorities couldn't link anyone to the murder. No suspects, no leads, nothing. Now, his murder was condemned by the U.S. Embassy in Mexico, the UN, and the EU. He would leave behind his wife, Griselda Triana, who was also a journalist, and his little daughter. And if you're asking what happened to his newspaper, well, they didn't die along with him. It was continued by another news outlet, Forbidden Stories in the German newspaper Zeit Online. So it's safe to say his legacy lives on. Now, Rodolfo joins the long list of journalists murdered for speaking against cartels and drug trafficking in Mexico. But unlike others, Rodolfo died at the hands of the one cartel that rarely ever targets journalists: Los Zetas. January 20th, 2007, 5 alleged members of Los Zetas reportedly kidnapped, tortured, mutilated, and burned his corpse in Tabasco, Mexico. What led to that brutal attack began with his job as a journalist and investigative crime reporter for a newspaper called Tabasco Hoy. Rodolfo was known for being very direct in his news reports and articles. As a result of this, he received a lot of death threats from suspected drug traffickers. At the time, the Zetas, a breakout faction of the Gulf Cartel, operated in the state of Tabasco. And if you don't know about these people, allow me to educate you a bit. This group is known for their brutal tactics, including beheadings and indiscriminate violence. Their top leaders emerged from the Mexican army, making them one of the most violent cartels in Mexico. Now, for context, they were one of the largest cartels in terms of geographical presence in Mexico, outshining even the Sinaloa cartel. And just like that cartel, this group is also concerned with drug trafficking, assassinations, extortion, kidnappings, and a bundle of other illegal activities. So now you know the type of people this guy was dealing with, yet Rodolfo wasn't afraid to expose them in his writing. However, that kind of pissed him off, and he paid with his life. January 20th, 2007. Rodolfo would call his wife from work, telling her that he would be home by late afternoon. But now we know he never made it back. On that day, Rodolfo was working on this article about a group of bank robbers in the area and these gangsters extorting cash machine users in Villahermosa, Tabasco. He left the office around 8 p.m., and that was the last time anyone saw him. January passed, and so did February, and then March, without a word or a lead on where Rodolfo might have gone. March 1st, 2010. The Tabasco state authorities informed through a press conference that Rodolfo had been kidnapped and killed by 5 alleged members of Los Zetas in retaliation for an article he published a day before that abduction. But here's where things get weird. A couple of suspects confessed to the kidnapping and gruesome acts that killed Rodolfo. They also told the police that his body was burned inside a metal barrel with diesel fuel, along with at least 4 other unidentified victims. His death was based solely on this confession. There was no evidence supporting the claims from these suspects. The police then closed down that investigation, and nothing was done afterward. This left his family and friends with just a few questions that needed to be answered. For instance, what if the police had no idea what happened to him and instead decided to put up this charade to get the press off their backs? Why'd they close this investigation without getting any evidence to verify the suspect's claims? And finally, maybe, why haven't you liked this video and subscribed yet? Come on, don't look at me. Go smack those buttons in the face. But at the end of the day, these stories serve as a reminder that being a journalist or a crime investigator is a tasking job, and they must have some level of protection from the government to keep them out of harm's way. This is famous TikToker Sabrina Duran Montero, a few months before she was shot dead in broad daylight for messing with one of Chile's most ruthless drug cartels. October 23, 2023, Duran Montero was murdered in southwest Santiago by two cartel sicarios for pissing off their bosses with her TikTok videos. However, the journey to her cruel demise began back in May 2022, when a massive operation led by the Investigative Police of Chile, aka the PDI, resulted in the arrest of Sabrina Duran Montero and her brothers for their involvement in a drug business operating in the city of Peñaflor. Aside from being a TikToker, Sabrina was the head of a drug trafficking organization which was under scrutiny for its roles in drug collection, distribution, and sales. However, in Las Praderas, her organization was at war with another crime syndicate. This bitter rivalry left this small town in a shadowy reflection of what it used to be, with residents living in perpetual fear of the carnage that could sprout out from any corner. It in turn forced the Chilean government to launch an onslaught on these criminal organizations, deploying 100 detectives to conduct a raid on every corner, every street, and every home. Consequently, Sabrina Duran Montero was arrested as she attempted to jump through the back window of her little hideout. She was apprehended and charged with crimes relating to narcotics distribution, but putting Sabrina behind bars was literally pushing her one step closer to her grave. During her 3-year sentence, Sabrina found herself immersed in the world of TikTok as one of its biggest influencers. She had more than 610,000 followers on her TikTok account under the username @Katrina Guzman, seemingly a reference to notorious Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Another alias used by her was La Ina and the TikTok Narco Queen, in reference to her little business venture. And yes, I'm just as confused as you as to how she managed to maintain that account while incarcerated, but all we can say is that Sabrina had her ways. She also tried having her way when she attempted a botched prison escape by breaking and jumping through the 3rd-floor window of her cell. However, she was caught and sent right back in. But you won't believe the path she took once she was let out on supervised probation.
No, exquisito. Que te sintiera muy rico. Exquisito.
Sabrina became an influencer, but not just any influencer. She was the kind showcasing plenty of gold jewelry and designer items. To us viewers, it looked like she was living her best life, but to Sabrina, she knew she was in danger. Why, you ask? Well, because her users began glorifying her and her double life as a narco queen and TikTok star. It shone light on her underground operations and her lifestyle, while making the thousands of people who watched her want to dive into this catastrophic career path. This made Sabrina a huge target, not only to her rivals, but to the Chilean government and her own group. It all pointed to one truth and one truth only. Sabrina Duran Montero needed to go. On the day of the incident, Sabrina was driving to a nail salon while she was stopped by 3 sicarios. She was forced out of her vehicle and shot 8 times. A bystander captured the moment on camera, showing the high and mighty Sabrina bleeding helplessly to death on the ground. The masked sicarios then drove her car away from the murder scene and burned it to ashes a few miles away. Ambulances were called and Sabrina was taken to the hospital, but she had lost so much blood on the way that she died en route. As of right now, no arrests have been made in connection to the murder, and the Chilean police have been unable to identify any motive. This could mean Sabrina just might be one of hundreds killed by rampant cartel and gang violence the media never tells us about. May 21st, 2019. Indian TikTok star Mohit Moore was sitting in a photocopy shop, scrolling through his smartphone when 2 young men barged in wearing helmets. They pointed 2 guns at him and fired so many bullets into his body that his teeth were even found in pieces when the police came. This tragic incident was the result of 2 factors: Moore's TikTok fame and his relation to one of India's most ruthless gangs. 27-year-old Moore was a gym instructor and famous TikToker in the small town of Najafgarh, Delhi. Before his death, he had amassed over 500,000 followers in a record-breaking time of just 8 months. And to the average TikToker, that's an almost impossible feat to accomplish, but to Moore, it was just the beginning of his end. April 3rd, 2019. A court in India banned the use of TikTok on the grounds of making its young users vulnerable to abuse. Now, this ban was lifted a few weeks later. However, some people felt the need to put an end to the vices caused by this Chinese-owned app, beginning with its major influencers. Moore didn't really fit into this criteria, but his influence on young Indians was very overwhelming. His persona of a Haryanvi bad boy with a good heart was close to his real self, and he labored to make every post better than the last. More emotion, more entertainment, more everything. In one skit, he got out of his car and offered his expensive shoes to a homeless guy who had broken his slippers. In others, he would sing, dance, share jokes, and show off his gym-built body. The point was to keep up the pace, and thousands of people were watching his videos. Some would even recognize him on the streets. Wherever he went, in Najafgarh or Dwarka, people asked him for selfies. Girls and boys wanted to be in his videos. Until something interesting occurred. Mohit Moore had helped a friend invest 30 rupee lakh in property through a criminal property dealer named Mangu. Mangu had a chain of legit businesses, but underground he was a crime boss with a lot of enemies, one of whom was a drug lord named Dalal. Now out of spite, Dalal ordered the assassination of Mangu, putting an end to his empire. But what Dalal didn't know was that Mangu wasn't the head of his criminal organization. It was another man, named Pehelwani. So after Mangu's death, Pehelwani took over everything he had, including his mainstream properties. Now at this point, Moore and his friend occupied one property formerly owned by Mangu, while Moore failed to make the 30 rupee lakh payment he was supposed to. Pehelwani pressured Moore to pay up, but he refused, insisting that he owed Mangu and not him. This left him with no other option than to order the murder of Mohit Moore. One of the men involved in this murder was a teenage gang member in Delhi. According to reports, this teen was recruited by Pehelwani after he pestered the crime lord to take him under his wing. To prove himself, Pehelwani sent him along with another soldier of his to find Moore. When they got to his location, they emptied over a dozen bullets into his body, leaving behind a gory scene for the police. In the end, the teenager was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, while Pehelwani fled Delhi, knowing the cops would stop at nothing to bring him down. January 8, 2011. Mexican authorities found a horrifying scene in Acapulco, a popular beach destination on the Pacific coast of Mexico. Outside a shopping center, authorities discovered 15 male bodies, 14 of which were decapitated. The handwritten signs found on the bodies were signed by El Chapo's people, making a clear reference to the Sinaloa cartel, led by Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The victims were soon identified as members of the South Pacific gang. The Sinaloa cartel decided to take out those men because they were getting in the way of the cartel's total control over the city and drug routes. April 2010. The South Pacific first appeared as a faction of the already weakened Beltran Leyva cartel. Then they eventually turned to operating on their own in Acapulco. In the beginning, the gang's reputation grew due to their violent and intimidating strategies, which involved recruiting a 12-year-old as a gunman and executioner. However, the gang didn't last long. They were dismantled within a year, with many members either captured or, yeah, you guessed it, killed. Why? Because they dared to challenge the infamous Sinaloa cartel, which you guys already know is one of the most ruthless on the planet.
Alguien se mata, por algo se mata algo.
Puro Sinaloa.
Since its establishment in the late 80s, the Sinaloa cartel, led by notorious figures like El Chapo and Ismael El Mayo Zambada, didn't think twice about getting into violent clashes with other cartels and even the Mexican government. We all know the cartel operates in various regions worldwide, and despite numerous arrests and seizures by law enforcement, it continues to thrive to this day, using sophisticated smuggling techniques like the tunnels under the US-Mexican border. However, it wasn't until Guzman was captured for the third time following 2 daring prison escapes in Mexico that we truly understood the full brutality of the cartel and the sadistic nature of its leader. 2019, after 3 years of being arrested and extradited to the US, El Chapo finally went on trial.
The long road that led Chapo Guzman from the mountains of Sinaloa to the courthouse behind us today was paved with death, drugs, and destruction.
Now, one of his former bodyguards, Isaias Valdez Rios, also referred to as Memon, was brought in as a witness by the prosecution during the trial. According to the ex-bodyguard, El Chapo had a thirst for blood and would just eliminate his enemies, regardless of their status or affiliation. One of those times was detailed by Rios in court, and he said he'd personally witnessed El Chapo murder 3 members of a rival gang. According to him, the 3 individuals were initially part of the Sinaloa cartel, but later joined a rival group. And as a result, Chapo considered them traitors and chose to subject them to immense suffering before ultimately taking their lives. For several hours, the drug lord brutally beat them. Valdez Rios said,
"They were completely like rag dolls. Their bones were totally broken. They couldn't move, and El Chapo was still hitting them with the branch, and his weapon too."
The three men were later driven to an area where they could see a large bonfire. There, the jury was told that El Chapo cursed each one before shooting him in the head with his rifle. The leader then took the bodies and threw them into a bonfire, telling his men that he didn't want any bones to remain. What we just talked about is barely scratching the surface as to what this cartel is ready to do to make sure nobody gets in its way, not even the police. And the next story on this list stands as proof. December 8th, 2023. The residents of Texcatlitlán, a town located southwest of Mexico City, reached a breaking point with the cartel that had been terrorizing their community. Frustrated and desperate for change, they armed themselves with whatever weapons they could find and made the bold decision to take a stand, no matter the consequences. Now, the real question is, how did the cartel respond to this unexpected uprising by a group of amateur vigilantes? Well, first, let's get into why the cartel was causing so much trouble for these villagers. Now, you see, cartels in Mexico are notorious for extorting money from any business they can get their hands on, even resorting to violence against those who refuse to pay up. One such cartel is La Familia Michoacana, which had been terrorizing the people of this village for a long time, demanding a monthly extortion fee. But the villagers decided enough was enough. December 8th. A clash erupted when the cartel announced a hike in its tax for a group of farmers in the small town. The farmers were already struggling to pay the original fee, and doubling it was simply impossible. One farmer explained,
"We had a very bad year of harvests, and we barely made enough money to pay the original extortion fee. With this increase, we basically had no choice but to die fighting or die from hunger."
The residents banded together and devised a plan to stand up to the cartel. They grabbed whatever weapon they could find and headed to meet the cartel at the local soccer field to exchange the supposedly agreed-on extortion money. The cartel was armed to the teeth, with some of them even wearing fake Mexican military uniforms. But this wouldn't deter the brave farmers who came to fight for what was rightfully theirs. Things quickly took a turn for the worse when a gunshot was fired, sparking chaos. The farmers, armed with shotguns, machetes, and sticks, fought back against the criminals. In total, 14 men had lost their lives to this violent confrontation. 4 farmers and 10 cartel members. Among the deceased was the cartel leader, known as Comandante Peso, or Commander Clown, the alleged leader of La Familia in the region, and the one behind the rise of the extortion fee. The remaining cartel members fled the scene, and the farmers proceed to set the trucks and the bodies of the fallen on fire. In the aftermath, a villager expressed frustration, stating,
"We told the Mexican army that this was going to happen because we weren't going to pay anymore. We asked for their back and no one showed up."
The farmers had reached out to the authorities, but their pleas always fell on deaf ears. When news of their struggle went public, things quickly turned political with the upcoming presidential election in June. The current president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, blamed the violence on drug consumption and neglect by past leaders. Now, he claimed the previous governments failed to take care of its young people, leading them into criminal activities. He emphasized the need to show them love and support to prevent this. On the other hand, presidential candidate Xochitl Gálvez criticized Obrador's security strategy of hugs not bullets, saying it left rural Mexicans feeling abandoned. In her statement, she argued,
"The hugs, I insist, have been for the criminals, and the bullets for citizens."
This time, however, there were no bullets for the citizens, at least from the government side, and no prison time either. Despite the tension, the government decided not to press charges against the villagers involved in the clash. It was deemed as legitimate self-defense, as these farmers were protecting their land. The villagers were relieved to hear this news, but their relief quickly turned to shock and horror. December 27th, La Familia Michoacana decided to exact their revenge on these poor villagers. The cartel would storm into this village at night and abduct 14 people. The abducted adults included 3 policemen who were seized at a cartel roadblock and a wounded villager the gang snatched from a hospital soon after the clash. Jose Luis Cervantes, the head prosecutor for the state of Mexico, located west of the country's capital, Mexico City, said no ransom demand had been received. Previously, state officials had denied anyone was kidnapped and said they were simply missing. But residents of this village and a nearby hamlet said that Familia Michoacana was demanding they hand over the leaders of the uprising in exchange for the kidnapped villagers. Now the villagers leaders refused to relent to the cartel's wishes, and the people taken were unheard of for days, until a shocking twist of events. January 16, 2024, the police received an anonymous tip leading them to 7 of the 14 kidnapped individuals, 3 women and 4 children. They were found behind a chapel in Zinacantepec, state of Mexico. They were unharmed, and it seemed as if though they were simply just sitting and waiting for the authorities to come and take them. Now, can we believe that the cartel had a change of heart and realized these women and kids were innocent? Well, considering what we know about cartels, this seems pretty unlikely. And as for the rest of the 7 who were kidnapped, they still haven't been found yet. The women and kids had no idea about where they were kept or what happened to them, and we can't help but wonder if they're still alive somewhere, being punished in the most brutal ways for standing against the tyranny of the cartels. January 11th, 2020, Carem Lisbeth Yepes Ortiz was walking down the aisle, filled with excitement and joy. But what she didn't know is that her special day would turn into a nightmare beyond her wildest imagination, as she was saying her vows to her groom, who happened to be a notorious drug lord known as El Calamardo. A group of armed men bursted into the church and started shooting. Carem was shot and fell to the ground, fatally wounded, while her groom was kidnapped by the attackers. Now, to make matters worse, Carem wasn't just married to a drug lord. She was also the sister of a well-known gang leader that came from a family deeply involved in drug trading. Now, their family had a long-standing feud with the CJNG, or Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Despite being one of the youngest cartels in Mexico, these guys are feared for their brutality and influence. The Mexican government ranks them as one of the most dangerous in the country, second to Sinaloa. The U.S. Department of Justice also says they're one of the top 5 most dangerous transnational criminal organizations in the world.
Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, CJNG, is the single criminal organization most responsible for these deaths on both sides of the border.
Let's go back to 2009, where they began as a branch for the Milenio Cartel. In just a few years, they transformed into the most dangerous, fastest growing, and richest drug cartel in Mexico. The leader of this cartel is Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, better yet known as El Mencho, who once worked as a policeman in Jalisco. We all know his power has been paved with drugs, money, and extreme brutality. And at the beginning of his journey, he spent some time in a U.S. prison for some drug-related crimes. But after being deported to Mexico, he just rose to being one of the most wanted criminals by the U.S. government within just a few years. Now, he's accused of drug trafficking, corruption, and murder in a federal court in D.C., and there's a staggering $10 million reward for his capture.
Tonight, the DEA is offering $10 million for information leading to the arrest of the Mexican drug kingpin known as El Mencho.
But why all the fuss for just one man? Well, El Mencho sets the tone for his cartel. His violence isn't just a means to an end. It's a sick pleasure and a twisted form of entertainment. This attitude trickles down to the rest of the cartel, influencing their tactics and ways of operation. For over a decade,
Did emerge of that CGNG convoy. These gunmen call themselves the elite group and pledge allegiance to El Mencho.
The CJNG has spread destruction throughout Mexico with their gruesome acts, including mass killings, acid baths, decapitations, and even a horrifying practice of cannibalism used during training of new sicarios. These people committed countless atrocities over the years. One such horrific example was during the busy evening rush hour in Veracruz, where 35 bodies bound and subjected to torture were callously dumped in the streets for all to witness. Another horrifying act of terror occurred when they killed a man and his son by attaching dynamite sticks to their bodies and detonating them. They would record this gruesome scene on their phones and find amusement in it, laughing all the while. Their actions hit a new low when they attacked and killed a girl mistakenly believed to be the daughter of a rival. She wasn't. That's just a taste of how brutal the CJNG can be. Who thinks it's a good idea to mess with these people? Well, we personally don't think so, but someone else believed he could challenge him. Carem's brother, Jose Antonio Yepes Ortiz, also known as El Mato, was the leader of the Santa Rosa de Lima gang, an organization specializing in the theft of fuel from pipelines in Guanajuato. The deadly feud with the CJNG was sparked by a narcomanta, or banner, that popped up in the city of Guanajuato. It basically threatened the Mexican president to get his security forces out of the state, or else there would be more bloodshed. The banner was signed by Santa Rosa de Lima. However, El Mato quickly denied having anything to do with the banner, saying it was a setup by his rival, El Mencho. Now, El Mencho didn't really appreciate his name being tossed around, so he was determined to take down El Maro's cartel and take over their territory. The CJNG thought they could achieve that by carrying out a massacre at El Maro's sister's wedding, and it would turn out that El Mencho would escape without a trace. El Mato made a run for it, leaving his fallen sister behind. This guy went into hiding, but it didn't last long. August 2nd, 2020, El Mato was captured in a joint operation between Guanajuato state government and Mexico's Secretariat of Public Security. Many believed the Santa Rosa de Lima gang was finished, but a surprising turn of events proved otherwise. January 2024, a photo of this woman believed to be the current leader of Santa Rosa de Lima went viral in Mexico. She's suspected of ordering numerous massacres and attacks in Guanajuato late last year, including an armed assault on police officers that resulted in 2 deaths, a violent shootout claiming the lives of firefighters, and a massacre at a holiday party in Salvatierra that left 11 dead and 12 wounded. The shocking part, the woman is rumored to be none other than Carem Lisbeth Yepes Ortiz herself. So how could this be? Maybe she's running the gang from beyond the grave. Now some speculate that she faked her death to evade the CJNG until she was ready to strike back. They point out that authorities never officially confirmed her death at the wedding, and so far the authorities have remained silent on the matter, leaving us in suspense, regardless of her true identity. This woman is clearly engaged in a dangerous battle against the CJNG. The outcome could be grim, because the CJNG never forgives nor forgets, and the upcoming story proves it. Authorities in Mexico made a shocking discovery: a body tightly wrapped in black garbage bags left in a park in Guadalajara. Now at first the police thought it was just a mannequin because of how tightly it was wrapped in plastic, but upon closer inspection they began to suspect that it was the body of Carlos Enrique Sanchez Martinez, a notorious gangster in Mexico. How did they know? Well, there was 2 pieces of Bristol board stabbed into the corpse with kitchen knives, claiming it was El Cholo, Sanchez Martinez's infamous nickname. But who was El Cholo? And what did he do to meet such a gruesome end? Well, El Cholo was once a loyal member of the CJNG. Some said he was even the right-hand man to El Mencho, as until he made the worst decision ever. Driven by power and greed, El Cholo broke away from the CJNG after allegedly ordering the execution of Marcos Hernandez, known as El Colombiano, the financial operator for the CJNG who had discovered El Cholo's shady dealings and reported them to El Mencho. El Cholo wasted no time in forming his own gang, the Nueva Plaza, funded by the Sinaloa Cartel, which is one of CJNG's biggest rivals. The gangs would engage in fierce battles over territories. And now here's a question for you. If you were once a member of El Mencho's deadly CJNG and saw firsthand the horrors that he and his cartel were capable of, would you ever dare to go against them? Personally, we couldn't even think about it, but El Cholo thought differently, and he paid the ultimate price for it. March 18th, 2021, a video popped up online showing a man in a red Lacoste shirt sitting in a chair, looking defeated and resigned to his fate. Behind him stood several masked men, armed and ready for what was to come. The man, later identified as El Cholo, began speaking, seemingly reading off a number of talking points. He took responsibility for various crimes around Mexico, including an attack on the U.S. consulate. He also implicated several high-ranking police officers who he claimed were working with him to take down the CJNG. One name he specifically mentioned was Omar Garcia Harfuch, a controversial cop known for his tough tactics and relentless pursuit of cartels. June 2020, Harfuch narrowly escaped a hail of bullets that seriously injured him and killed 2 of his friends. Harfuch was quick to blame the CJNG for the assassination and stated,
"Our nation must continue to confront cowardly organized crime."
Following the attack, Mexico City's Attorney General detained at least a dozen suspects who were members of the CJNG. However, El Mencho remained untouched, leaving Harfuch seeking revenge. Now, right after the video went viral, Harfuch denied all claims, posting a tweet on X saying he wouldn't pay any attention to the words of a criminal kidnapped by other criminals. It was like he knew for sure that the men behind El Cholo belonged to the CJNG. At the end of that video, El Cholo advised his supporters to stop following him and dedicate more time to their families, and nearly on the brink of tears, he finished the video by saying,
"Look how I ended."
Can you imagine having to read those words, knowing exactly what's going to happen? Shortly after the video went viral, the disfigured body wrapped in plastic was found on the park bench. He was shot in the head several times and was clearly severely tortured before the final bullet put an end to his misery. And there, Pinned to his chest was the covered in blood sign that helped authorities identify the body even before taking it to the morgue. The sign read in Spanish, "The Traitor, El Cholo." March 17th, 2023, Mexico faced off against Puerto Rico in a high-stakes 2023 World Classic baseball game semifinal. But while Mexico ultimately secured the victory, the real story lies in the chaos that erupted during the game, especially for 6ix9ine. The showdown occurred at Miami's Lone Depot Park, drawing a crowd of celebrities. Yet despite all the star power in the stands, it was 6ix9ine who stole the spotlight. Thanks to his Mexican-Puerto Rican background, Daniel Hernandez, better known as 6ix9ine, was born on May 8, 1996, in Brooklyn, New York, and was raised in Bushwick by his Mexican immigrant mother. His Puerto Rican father was absent from his life until he was 9, but they never really had a good relationship due to his father's heroin addiction and prison time for drug trafficking. In 2010, 6ix9ine's stepfather, also Puerto Rican, was tragically shot and killed near their home. This loss put the family in financial hardship, forcing his mother to apply for welfare and often leaving Daniel and his brother Oscar hungry. They had to wear secondhand outfits and share a bed with their mom. The trauma of losing his stepfather deeply affected 6ix9ine, leading to emotional struggles, weight loss, and hospitalization for depression and PTSD. Expelled in 8th grade, he turned to the streets to support his family, working odd jobs but eventually getting drawn into gangs and drugs. Around this time, he developed his wild persona, complete with rainbow hair and face tats. His aggressive style helped him gain attention, leading to his breakout hit, Gummo, in 2017. Now, I'm not going to dive into the details of his meteoric rise to fame or the endless controversies he stirred up. However, what you need to understand is that 6ix9ine became the figure he is today through his constant run-ins with the law, gang ties, and even public scandals. That cemented his reputation as one of hip-hop's most notorious and divisive personalities, and that's exactly why that baseball game was so significant. With his mixed Puerto Rican-Mexican heritage, many Puerto Rican fans naturally expected 6ix9ine to stand with them, especially since his father was Puerto Rican. But in true 6ix9ine fashion, he did the most unpredictable thing possible. As Mexico pulls ahead on the scoreboard, a video surfaces of 6ix9ine proudly waving a Mexican flag, and the reaction was instant. Fans went wild. One even hurled a beer can at him, while others threw up their middle fingers in frustration. Mexico eventually claimed the victory, and shortly after, additional clips of 6ix9ine went online, showing him arguing why he embraces his Mexican background while rejecting his Puerto Rican heritage.
Está tu papá ahora.
No me importa.
Okay.
No me importa. Mi mamá me crió mexicana.
Pero tú triunfaste en la vida, ¿no?
¿Qué? Pues triunfar.
¿Con tu papá o sin tu papá?
Mi mamá me crió mexicana, inmigrante.
Tu madre fue madre y padre para ti, tu madre. Dile algo a tu mamá. Dile algo a tu mamá.
Esa mamá la quiero con todo el corazón. Ella jugó madre y padre conmigo.
But here's the real plot twist. Just 3 days later, another shocking video surfaces showing Tekashi getting ambushed and beaten at an LA fitness gym in Miami. The incident occurs inside the locker room, where a group of men assaulted him while he was reportedly without security. Footage of the attack goes viral, showing 6ix9ine on the ground as men punch and kick him repeatedly. Despite the violent nature of the beating, 6ix9ine managed to walk away from the scene, but was later hospitalized with injuries to his face, ribs, and back. The assault gained widespread attention, with many speculating about the possible motive. And given 6ix9ine's controversial past, including his cooperation with law enforcement to convict members of the Nine Trey Gangsta Bloods and his public feuds with various celebrities, many believe that the attack was a form of retaliation. However, some rumors went around online claiming that the attack was linked to him disrespecting Puerto Rican fans at that baseball game. Though these were initially just rumors, they gained some credibility when 4 months later, 6ix9ine gets some direct death threats from Puerto Rican gangs and smaller cartels. They warned him to stay away from Puerto Rico right before his scheduled performance in their country, giving the rumors an unsettling edge of truth. Tekashi was set out to perform in the 2023 Premios Juventud, but Puerto Rican police urged him to withdraw due to those online threats and banners warning him against stepping foot on the island. True to his bold nature, though, he brushes off those warnings and posts a picture of him proudly holding the Puerto Rican flag while standing on the steps of a private jet that had just landed. He even tells him that he wants to perform, but ultimately event organizers canceled his performance. Just when it seemed that the drama had reached its conclusion, Mexican cartels made their entrance on July 23, 2023, only 3 days after 6ix9ine's canceled performance. A Puerto Rican Facebook page posting a chilling message, allegedly from this anonymous Mexican cartel, would threaten that if anything happened to Tekashi while he was on the island, there would be a complete ban on Puerto Rican artists performing in Mexico ever again. So while 6ix9ine manages to piss off some criminal organizations in Puerto Rico, looks like the Mexican cartels have his back. Now, while we assume that's a good thing for him, the same can't be said about this next rapper, who these same Mexican cartels decided to extort.
You have to go over a bit more. I can't go over. You're in the fucking thing. Come on, boy. Your mom is on the
It's March 8th, 2023, and American rapper Chameleon shocked her fans by posting 2 jaw-dropping videos on Instagram, revealing the wild moment she was robbed by Mexican cartels for the most bizarre reasons. Now, before we get into it, let's go over who Chameleon is, just for those who don't know. Chameleon, born Alja Jackson in Jacksonville, Florida, is an American rapper, singer, and songwriter, known for her unique blend of hip-hop and R&B. Chameleon became famous not only for those catchy looks, but her wonderful lyrics. With songs like Twerk For Me, she became a viral hit, further solidifying her as a force to watch. Her music has a lot of energetic beats and empowering messages, appealing to a broad audience, specifically young women who identify with her themes of independence, self-confidence, and success. Chameleon's talent extends beyond music. She showcased her acting in the hit TV series Love and Hip Hop Miami, where she became a fan favorite due to her charismatic presence and authentic personality. In the show, she opened up about her struggle, including navigating the challenging music industry and her journey towards success. The transparency helped her connect even deeper with her fans, making her not only a rapper, but a relatable figure. In addition to her music and TV career, though, Chameleon has written songs for major artists like Rihanna, Jordan Sparks, and even Diddy, further proving her skills as a songwriter. Now, fast forward to March 3rd, 2023, when 4 Americans got kidnapped and tortured by members of the Gulf Cartel. A lot of people came forward on social media to talk about their own experiences with cartels and criminal organizations in Mexico. Chameleon also came forward on Instagram to talk about her own horrifying experience. After sharing the now deleted videos, she wrote,
"This footage is of me and my crew in Mexico. The cartel pulled us over, saw money in our bags and tried to collect more, or they said they were taking us away."
She goes on to explain how these men extorted her stylist of $1,500 and had the audacity to demand more money. While the so-called cartel officers were extorting her friend, Chameleon would hide her money before they searched her bags for more cash. Now, the most unsettling part of this extortion is that the cartel here assumed she was involved in drug trafficking, even though they found no drugs on her. Sure, you could say she didn't piss them off, but her unfamiliarity with how things work in that area probably made her an easy target for extortion. And it's honestly nothing short of a miracle that she even got out of there unharmed. Her comments section got flooded with people thankful for her safety, but also wanted to know what part of Mexico she was in, and why was she a target. So in this Instagram story, she wrote,
"People are asking me about Mexico. The best advice that I could give you is don't stay in an Airbnb. Stay somewhere that's in a developed community, because our ass was in an Airbnb,"
she said in a video.
"The streets weren't even paved where we were staying at."
She finally said the tires of her car were slashed, and she was never going back to Mexico because it was the worst trip of her life. Around noon on February 7th, 2024, Mexican singer Chuy Montana was captured on video signing autographs and chatting with fans. Just hours later, he was kidnapped, killed, and his body later found dumped along the Playas de Rosarito-Tijuana highway. While his death shocked many Mexicans, it becomes less surprising when you hear the chilling details behind his story. Jesus Cardenas, widely known by his stage name Chuy Montana, was a rising star in Mexico's music scene. Before signing with Ortiz Paz's Street Mob Records, Cárdenas gained popularity on social media for serenading drivers waiting in line at the San Isidro-Tijuana border crossing, singing and playing his guitar between the cars. Now, his breakthrough came with the release of hit singles like Porte de Scarface and Ramos Puchones, which catapulted him to fame. He was also featured on Polvos de Chanel, a track from Fuerza Regida's latest album, Pa las Babies y Pelequieda. Montana, along with other street mob record artists, specialized in corrido tumbados or bellicose, a subgenre of regional Mexican music. But why would anyone want him dead if he was such a good guy? Well, that all comes down to his hometown, Tijuana. You see, Tijuana, Mexico, is the 6th most dangerous city in the world, largely due to that violent crime driven by drug cartels. The city has been a hotspot for cartel activity, more specifically from groups like Sinaloa or the Arellano Felix cartel. These organizations are involved in almost any crime you can think of: drug trafficking, human trafficking, extortion, murder, you name it. But another thing that makes Tijuana such a dangerous city is the proximity to the U.S. border. This makes the place a crucial hub for those smuggling operations, which further fuel the struggle between rival cartels. And as a result, the city goes through frequent homicides, kidnappings, and cartel-related executions. I mean, the murder rate in Tijuana is so high, deaths are basically the city's daily weather report. But what exactly does any of this have to do with Chuy Montana? Now, he mostly steered clear of cartel drama throughout his career, but ironically, he got pulled into their world thanks to the last person you'd ever expect: his driver. The body of Chuy Montana's driver, Miguel Pavon, was found in Tijuana, bound hand and foot while wrapped in a sheet. Next to him was a narco message signed by the Arellano Felix cartel. And it was through this message that Mexican authorities realized Pavon's links to the cartel as a drug trafficker. On the other hand, Chuy Montana would meet a similar fate. After being kidnapped and tortured by the cartel's hitmen, he tried escaping while being transported in a van. In a desperate attempt, he threw himself from the moving vehicle onto the Tijuana-Rosarito freeway near Cuesta Blanco. But the gunman caught up with him and killed him by riddling his body with gunshots. The two corpses were found surrounded by 9mm shell casings, and Montana might just have been a casualty in Pavon's twisted dealings with the cartel. It's pretty sad, but sometimes it's the fate that comes with meddling with drug traffickers.
¿Qué show, mi gente? Feliz inicio de semana para todos. Ya se nos acabaron las vacaciones a los que pudimos tener vacaciones, plebada. Ahora sí, a chingarle. Yo aquí vengo a hacer vueltas a los bancos a ver qué tal.
April 18th, 2022, Jorge Luis uploaded a video on Instagram and casually mentioned his location. How could he have known that this live stream would turn into the biggest mistake of his life? 2021, Jorge Luis, also known as El Compa Jorge.
Solamente es un favor de que le quiero pedir. A ver, morro, dice, ¿qué quieres? ¿Qué favor quieres? Le dije, si me vas a matar, le dije.
2021, Jorge Luis, also known as El Compa Jorge, shared a terrifying experience that changed his life forever. This guy had been kidnapped by cartel members, leaving him traumatized and struggling with his mental health. For months, as he struggled to cope with the trauma, Jorge was too afraid to leave his house, fearing for his safety, even stopping at red lights.
Este yetito lo están rifando, dicen. Tiene los rines parecidos como que trae el bochito. Vaya, llegaba mi compa.
Before this harrowing experience, Jorge had a YouTube channel of over 62,000 subscribers, where he shared his passion for cars and UTVs in Cacan. He started with simple vlogs and storytime videos, but eventually would focus on expensive cars and his collection. However, his flashy lifestyle would attract unwanted attention from violent cartels. In addition to that, those cartels also suspected him of having some connections to El Chapo and the notorious Sinaloa cartel. In one of his vlogs on his channel, Jorge went back to where he was kidnapped, even though he was scared about talking about it. On this fateful day in 2021, Jorge's life took a terrifying turn, and he would talk about how one night he was hanging out with a friend when things went really wrong. His friend asked for a favor to give someone else a ride, and Jorge agreed because he's kind and helpful. He couldn't have known that this favor would have almost cost him his life. Now, as they drove, Jorge started feeling more and more uneasy, especially because he'd been drinking earlier. So he would stop his car to use the bathroom, but before he even got out, another car pulls up, and a man with a rifle claims to be from the authorities. This man takes Jorge's phone and, with his accomplices, tied him up, blindfolded him, and interrogated him about his source of income. Jorge truthfully explained that he owned a tortilla shop and a YouTube channel, but his captors didn't believe him. They thought he must have been connected to a dangerous cartel to afford such a nice car. Despite Jorge's repeated denials, though, they threatened him, hit him with a gun, and taunted him to show that they were in control. So desperate and scared, Jorge begged him to leave his body where his family could find it if they were planning on killing him. Surprisingly, that plea worked. His captors released him, removing his blindfold and untying him. Things would return to normal for Jorge after a while, until he would begin his car vlogs and start investigating some cartel's business. In fact, this guy would go to share a storytime video about the time he unknowingly talked to one of El Chapo's sons. And once again, that video attracted the attention of rival cartels. While Jorge's channel was doing well, it didn't last. On April 18, 2022, at around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Jorge announced to his 30,000 followers on Instagram that he was just returning from a particular bank. In this video, he had gone to investigate the queue at that bank due to a holiday. 45 minutes after he uploaded that video, gunmen intercept him in a gray Toyota SUV, just as he was about to enter his house located on Gilberto Owen Street, between Juan Ruiz del Aracon and Jose Vasconcelos Streets, a site that is 2 blocks from the 9th Military Zone of Culiacan, Sinaloa. Without warning, they opened fire and then escaped in their car. Witnesses wasted no time as they called the authorities and an ambulance. Jorge was badly hurt, having several gunshot wounds. Although paramedics tried really hard to save his life, sadly, his injuries were too severe. He died in that ambulance on the way to the hospital, and the doctors there confirmed DOA. According to speculations, people think that Jorge made a mistake by staying in the same area after his kidnapping. The police also suspected that the gunmen were from rival cartels of the Sinaloa group. And despite the suspicions, Compa Jorge's killers are still out there, and the police have yet to solve the case. August 2022, popular YouTuber Ruben Ortega was shot dead in front of his family. But it was soon discovered that there was more to his assassination than just the tip of a dark conspiracy.
Su esposa fue atendida en el sitio porque pequeños cristales le provocaron lesiones en uno de sus brazos, pero no fue necesario trasladarla a un hospital. Contó que los dos asaltantes eran altos.
Ruben Ortega, aka Super Chanelo, was a YouTuber who lived a life filled with passion in the vibrant town of Ixtapaluca, Mexico. 45-year-old Ortega was a popular streamer and influencer of the Mexican tradition. In his videos on TikTok and YouTube, you can see him celebrating his hometown's traditions and dances, wearing a distinctive red mask, and attending local events. In fact, he adopted the name Super Chanelo due to his love for a Mexican dance, which originated in Tlayacapan, in the state of Morelos. He would conduct interviews with the sole objective of spreading Mexican tradition to new generations. Ortega's dedication earned him popularity and support from his community, despite his small following. Now, what seemed like a simple life, Ortega actually stepped on some toes in one way or the other, and he paid dearly for it. August 31st, 2022, tragedy strikes moments after Ortega gets out of his vehicle to open the gate to his house while returning home with his family. It's at this point 2 armed guys suddenly step in front of him and open fire point-blank range. Ortega died on the spot. His wife was also injured in the ambush, and their son, who was surprisingly unharmed, witnessed the horrific scene. The neighbors called the police after they heard the gunshots and saw Ortega lying on the ground. The motive behind his murder remains unclear, but some believe it may be linked to his outspoken criticism of corrupt Mexican political groups, as well as cartels. In addition to this, his assassination occurred amid a series of violence in the country caused by drug cartels, as well as other homicides that have nothing to do with the struggle between these groups. The news of Ortega's death spread quickly on social media, leaving his fans and community in mourning. A heartfelt message on his Facebook page confirmed the sad news and expressed gratitude for the support he received. Unfortunately, Ortega's killers remain at large, leaving the community with a sense of unease and a reminder of the dangers faced by those who mess with the wrong cartels as they try to make a positive impact. May 15th, 2023, Victor Masson, a 27-year-old out of Quebec, Canada, was having a lovely time in the Mexican beach town of Puerto Escondido before a group of sicarios approached him. Masson had no dealings with cartels, at least none that we know of, just a regular tourist in Mexico looking to have a good time. However, these sicarios harassed and fatally shot him dead in his car. before fleeing the neighborhood. Masson arrived in Mexico with his girlfriend, and at the moment he was killed, she was still at the hotel where they were staying. They arrived at the beach town the day before, while Masson decided to grab a drink alone. When he got to the bar, he encountered 4 individuals who, probably because they were drunk, continuously threatened him. One of these individuals was a known cartel member named Mario Omara Sanguinez Lopez. And when it came time to settle the bill, Omara and his guys harassed Masson and tried compelling him to pay for their drinks. Obviously, Masson refused, but began to panic at that moment. He made a video of these guys and also sent a voice note to his girlfriend explaining everything. He dialed for the police after things got out of hand, but that was the last anyone heard of Masson. On the other side of the street stood a man named Sergio Ruiz Luengas, casually strolling along. In a chilling twist of fate, Sergio bore witness to the gruesome scene of Masson's murder. According to Sergio, he observed Mr. Omara and his gang as they robbed Masson, but the situation took a dark turn when Omara himself drew his pistol and fired 2 fatal shots into Masson, right after overhearing Masson's desperate call to the cops reporting the robbery. Immediately after committing the grim act, Omara approached Sergio and issued a threat, warning him to never speak a word about the night's events to anyone. 1 week later, Sergio would go against the warning and report the case to the police. At the time, investigations were already ongoing to apprehend suspects in the murder case. Sergio's statement and the ID on Omara as the man who pulled the trigger was all the cops needed to charge Omara with first-degree murder. Sadly, it cost Sergio his life. Remember, these guys aren't petty criminals. They're hardened cartel sicarios who would stop at nothing to get revenge, even if it meant risking the lives of thousands of men. After Omara was arrested, Sergio was killed a few days later, making this case even more sophisticated. On the other hand, there was Victor Masson's family, who were finding it extremely difficult to get a lawyer to represent them. You have to understand that no one really wants to mess with any cartel members. It's like committing suicide, like jumping into a fire while still alive. It's really dangerous. His girlfriend had to take the next flight back to Canada to avoid getting killed as well. As of right now, Omara's in custody with Mexican authorities, being linked to the infamous Oaxaca cartel, a small faction of the Tijuana cartel that operates in the area. Since their only eyewitness to the murder is now dead, will Masson's girlfriend come forward with audio and video evidence in her possession, knowing she might get killed? Who knows? August 11th, 2020. The body of 23-year-old Lisbeth Flores was found dead in the Mexican town of Matamoros, just across the Rio Grande from Brownsville. Keep in mind that Flores was a mother of 2 and was also in Mexico for vacation. So, what's the story behind her murder? Lisbeth was born in the close-knit border community of Brownsville, Texas. She'd graduated from Los Fresnos High School and had her first child almost right after. Ever since then, Lisbeth dedicated herself to motherhood. She lived with her children and took care of them the best way possible. Sadly, these children lost their mother because of one sicario and sex offender named Braulio Martinez. August 9th, 2023. Lisbeth Flores told her mother Maria that she'd be crossing the border into Matamoros to visit her boyfriend. For context, Matamoros sits directly across the Rio Grande from Brownsville, and Flores assured her mother that she would return later that same evening. This wasn't her first time crossing the border, but for some reason, her decision to do it didn't sit right with her mother. Maybe it was her instincts telling her something bad was about to happen. But regardless, she let Lisbeth go. However, the moment she failed to return home that night, Maria knew something was wrong. She wasted no time in filing a missing persons report with the Brownsville Police Department the next morning, desperately hoping that the authorities could swiftly locate her daughter. Tragically, the day after the filing, Mexican officials discovered her lifeless body abandoned in a field on the outskirts of Matamoros. The condition of her remains was shockingly horrific. She'd been brutally assaulted, with her teeth callously removed before her passing. The fatal injury seemed to be from a powerful blow to the head using this large rock discovered at the scene. Some say it was a robbery, others say it was sexual assault, but no one really knows what happened exactly between Lisbeth and the killer. The good thing is, the killer was arrested. On August 11th, Martinez was caught at his residence in connection with the murder, and after pleading no contest, he was sentenced to 168 months imprisonment. That's 14 years behind bars. Now, do you really think that's enough jail time for this crime he committed? Well, regardless of what you say, certain people in Lisbeth's community didn't think so. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers rallied together to support the Flores family in the weeks after her death. Community vigils were held to honor her, with attendees sharing tearful embraces on who Lisbeth was. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, it's simple. Her death was one of many that have occurred along the border between the US and Mexico. She wasn't the first and certainly won't be the last to experience such a gruesome death without committing any crime. Due to the level of violence in this area, her mother is now left without a child, and her own kids are left without a mother. Thankfully, local businesses stepped up by contributing funds to her children's education. And on top of that, a well-respected Brownsville funeral home even volunteered to repatriate Flores' body in a bid to relieve her poor mother of the financial burden. And while these actually help, nothing will ever bring Lisbeth Flores back. October 20th, 2021, an Indian woman named Anjali Rayat lost her life in a shootout between two gangs in Tulum, Mexico, just a few hours before she celebrated her 30th birthday. For context, Tulum is known for its beautiful white sandy beaches and crystal clear waters, and it's become a trendy destination for a younger crowd seeking a unique beach holiday experience in Mexico. However, the money flowing through the local hotels, restaurants, and bars made them attractive targets for extortion by criminal organizations and, worst of all, Mexican cartels. Now this in addition to the fact that the demand for drugs amongst tourists turned out to be so profitable, it was an open market for these cartels and they took it. However, the origin of violence in this area would begin with cartels fighting over who was going to sell these drugs. While the homicide rate in Tulum, Playa del Carmen, and Cancun is relatively low compared to other parts of Mexico like Sinaloa and Jalisco, there were indications of a worsening security situation before this incident finally occurred. In June of the same year, there was a bold attack on a popular Cancun beach, resulting in an American tourist getting wounded and 2 deaths. The same month, 2 unidentified men were murdered on a Tulum beach, and from there it just kept getting worse. So how exactly did Anjali die? October 20th, 2021. This tragic incident occurred as she and her husband, Utkar Srivastava, were enjoying their time at a beach resort here. After having dinner, they would sit on the terrace of the La Macarida restaurant, engaging in a conversation with 4 other tourists. Out of nowhere, a group of armed individuals opened fire at a table nearby, leading stray bullets to hit Anjali and another tourist, Jennifer Henshold from Germany. Both men died on the spot. The remaining 3 tourists, including Anjali's husband, sustained injuries. The late-night attack appeared to be tied to a territorial dispute. Whether the tourists were intended targets or innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire, we don't know. But what we do know is that the day after the attack, a group known as Los Pelones, which has been a source of terror in the area since at least 2017 and is allegedly linked to the Gulf Cartel, claimed responsibility. Now you're asking, why did they attack the tourists? Well, they felt their counterpart, like the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, was dominating the sales of drugs in this area. So they would attack these tourists in hopes to chase others away and stop all businesses, both criminal and legitimate. Simply put, if they couldn't have the upper hand in the market, no one could. But the Mexican government wasn't about to let this just happen. The authorities deployed 300 troops from the National Guard to bolster security in the area. And we can't deny it was a solid move, but the thing is, it also has its downsides. Maintaining the image of Tulum as a fun place to relax and have some classic avocado toast alongside federal guards patrolling the beach is a challenge. Who's going to enjoy their time with all these guards holding guns everywhere? Maybe that's the only solution. Maybe it'll cease being a tourist attraction. But the point here is tourists aren't safe in Tulum. Latavia, a resident of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, set off on this journey with 3 of her close friends to Matamoros, Mexico. All Latavia really wanted was a tummy tuck surgery, joining the growing number of American women seeking more affordable surgical procedures across the border. But the events that eventually unfolded were far from that. It might interest you to know that it wasn't the first time Latavia was in Mexico getting surgery done. However, this time things would take a terrifying turn. When Latavia and her friends got to Matamoros, they couldn't identify the clinic where she had an appointment. These friends of hers came along as a form of protection just to keep her safe. But in the process of locating their destination, gunshots suddenly rang out, shattering their plans. They found themselves caught in a gunfight between two Mexican cartels. It felt like a bad dream, and it felt even worse after two of Latavia's friends, Zindel Brown and Shaid Woodward, lost their lives getting hit by stray bullets. Latavia and another companion, Eric Williams, were taken captive by one of the cartels and spent 4 harrowing days in captivity with the lifeless bodies of their friends beside them. And we're really not surprised if you've heard this story before because it's made headline news globally. Mexican officials believe the friends were taken by mistake, as criminals in Mexico typically don't target Americans. And we know this because immediately after the cartel found out they were Americans, they tendered an apology letter. You heard that right. 2 days after McGee and Williams were let go, Mexican authorities found 5 men tied up and dumped by the roadside, with a letter from the cartel saying that these men were the ones responsible for the attack on the Americans. It was all kind of weird and confusing until Latavia came back to the US revealing more information about what exactly went down. Latavia explained that she initially wanted to get this tummy tuck as a way to hide having 6 children. A lot of people blamed her for having these insecurities, which led to the death of her friends, but Latavia was dealing with a lot already, and adding extra blame wasn't helping anything. Now at the same time, the question of why she chose to go to Mexico to get this done was also brought up. And the answer was simple: cost saving. Medical tourism in Mexico is by far one of the most popular reasons Americans go to that country. Many Americans, mostly women, make this trip each year, getting these surgeries at affordable prices that they couldn't do in the US. This has been the trend for many years, despite the dangers of encountering a Mexican cartel. I'd probably be doing a huge injustice if I didn't dive deeper into why Americans like Latavia go all the way to Mexico for these procedures. You see, Tamaulipas, the state in Mexico where the incident occurred, is notorious for cartel violence and is one of the Mexican states that the U.S. State Department warns Americans to avoid due to the high crime rates. Yet, women from the U.S. continue to cross the border from Brownsville, Texas, into Matamoros because of how good the doctors are over there when it comes to doing these body enhancements. You see, in 2019, about 1.2 million Americans traveled to Mexico for these procedures, with cosmetic surgeries making roughly 15% of all medical travel from the U.S. The cost savings are ridiculous, making it a really attractive option for those looking for affordable alternatives. To put into context how lucrative this is, this woman named Jasmine Wilson from Washington, D.C. shared her experience about traveling to Mexico for body shaping surgery. She mentioned that the same procedure in the U.S. could have cost her $20,000, while in Mexico, it was only a quarter of that price. This significant cost difference, coupled with the willingness of Mexican surgeons to operate on patients with higher body mass indexes, has really contributed to the popularity of medical tourism. You see, for patients undergoing procedures like butt lifts, complications like blood clots or embolisms are a significant concern. However, doctors in Mexico are experts at managing these risks, making the risk-to-reward ratio favorable when weighed against encountering a cartel. That's crazy. Okay, enough of the lecture. So, why was Latavia a target that day? If it's common practice for women to go to Mexico for these types of surgeries, well, we're tempted to say she was at the wrong place at the wrong time, but maybe it was also the fact that she was in a car with 3 men that made the cartel mistake them for their rivals. And according to Latavia herself, she claimed that she saw the clinic online, probably on TikTok or Instagram, and was wowed by the doctors showing their before and after. So she decided to take a trip down there. But, as I've already said, they got lost. And as they tried to go back to Texas, a car obstructed their path, and one of the passengers displayed a gun. One of their friends urged everyone to crouch down and go, but as soon as they did, gunfire erupted. A bystander's video captured the moment when they were loaded into the bed of a white pickup truck and taken away. Surprisingly, Latavia was the only one of the 4 not seriously injured. She and Mr. Williams then decided they should attempt an escape and seek help. She ran towards the gated fence but was forced back down and beaten when she failed to climb over. The captors eventually took her back into the truck and drove away. The 4 friends were transported to what appeared to be a makeshift clinic. It was there that they realized the extent of the tragedy, with the 2 of them, Mr. Brown and Mr. Woodward, appearing lifeless. Mr. Williams, who had been stripped and shot in the legs, had his wounds hastily stitched. Subsequently, they were moved again to another location where they found themselves among a dozen other captives who had been severely beaten. beaten. After 2 days, Latavia successfully escaped once again. When she spotted an empty vehicle outside their place of captivity, she was able to grab a guard's phone on her way out and dial 911 repeatedly, hoping that some police would come to their rescue. But in the minutes of waiting for an operator to pick up, her captors eventually caught up with her and took her back to their base. Latavia managed to scream for help before the cell was taken away from her, leading authorities to pin her location and attempt a rescue mission. She was eventually rescued alongside Mr. Williams, while the cartel issued an apology letter that really got everyone surprised. And if you're asking if she ever got that tummy tuck surgery done, well, she did it. On the other hand, Williams got to get surgery for his legs and may never walk again. May 2023, 23-year-old Argentinian rugby player Benjamin Gamond was touring the state of Oaxaca, Mexico before he was brutally killed with a machete by cartel members. Gamond played for Club Tala in Argentina and was a high-profile rugby player. He was looking to enjoy a nice time while on vacation, so he left Argentina with 2 friends and headed to the island in Villa de Tututepec, Mexico. When they got there, they met a man named Cruz Irving Martinez Flores, who introduced himself as a surf instructor, proceeding to show him around. After a pretty normal conversation, it seemed like they just made a new friend, but that was far from the truth. The next day, when Gamond and his friends set out to surf the water, they approached Martinez, asking him where they could find surfboards. To their surprise, he looked at them like he had no idea who they were and why the heck they were even talking to him in the first place. This confused them a bit, making them head to a different beach in Laguna de Chacagua. And while that was arguably the safest thing they could have done at that moment, it didn't stop Martinez from carrying out his diabolical plan. On the day of the incident, Gamond was having a peaceful time at the beach before Martinez came out of nowhere and used a machete to strike his head from behind, shattering his skull in the process. As a result of this devastating attack, he experienced hypovolemic shock, which basically is a condition caused by significant blood loss. While Martinez ran away, other beachgoers swiftly transported Gamond to the General Hospital in Mexico City, where he eventually died. His death was mourned by his family, his club, and even his fans. The fact that Martinez attacked without any form of provocation was just disturbing. 2 of his friends, Santiago Lastra and Macarena Gonzalez, who accompanied him to Mexico, also suffered from this attack. Santiago sustained a broken arm while trying to fight off Martinez and his crew, while Macarena got a cut and a fractured humerus. Now, being a high-profile case, all hands were on deck to get this guy, and it didn't take long before Martinez was arrested. Why did he do it? We will never know. But what we do know is that Martinez also went after 3 other tourists on the same beach. After the police took in Cruz Irving into custody the following morning, it was identified that Martinez was a 21-year-old native from Ometepec, Guerrero, meaning he wasn't even a resident of the area. When asked why he killed Gamond, he kept a straight face. However, according to some speculations, Martinez was mentally unstable and had dealings with the cartel in the past. This made him feel Gamond and his friends were sent to kill him, resulting in this reckless attack. Benjamin's brother Facundo, who intended to visit his brother in Mexico, left a heartfelt message for him through Instagram. It read, "Fly high, Torito. We shall meet again. We love you." Jose Sergio Vega Quamea was a famous Mexican singer killed by a Mexican cartel for one of the worst reasons you could imagine. Born on September 12, 1969, Sergio, who went by the stage name El Shaka, was a regional Mexican singer. He was born in Ejido Horno, Sonora, located near Ciudad Obregón in Mexico, and was the 8th child of 13 children in his family. Growing up, there were little to no opportunities for Sergio to take advantage of, so in 1989, he relocated to the US where he joined his brother's musical group in Phoenix as a singer and bajo sexto player. The group Los Hermanos Vega later signed with Joey Records and released numerous hit songs such as Corazón de Oropel and El Rayo de Sinaloa. Sergio Vega's time with the group helped him launch his musical persona, and after 5 years writing with this group, he had a fallout with his brother and decided to leave. He then created another group, Los Rayos del Norte, and signed with a new record label, Digital Universal. They released numerous hit albums while Sergio's fame continued to surge. However, he made one big mistake, getting involved with the narcocorridos genre of music. In case you didn't know, narcocorrido is a genre of romanticized ballads set against a polka beat that recount in glamorous detail the lives, loves, and murderous exploits of Mexico's most feared cocaine barons. Kinda like singing about their accolades. So you might be thinking, why the heck would anyone sing about that? Well, for starters, the life of these kind of singers can be very lucrative. Drug lords who make billions of dollars from trafficking cocaine and other substances to the US don't mind paying tens of thousands of dollars to see these singers to, in a reporter's words,
immortalize them in special commissioned songs.
But the downside to it was, when a song is made to glorify a particular drug lord, the singers instantly become target. It's for the drug lord's enemies, who hate seeing their rivals glorified by anyone, and Sergio Vega was not exempted from this rule. However, one after another, narco-corridos singers began disappearing, or getting murdered in cold blood, including Grammy-nominated singer Sergio Gomez. Gomez was the frontrunner of the band Que Paz de la Sierra, but after performing at a concert in the state of Michoacan, Gomez was kidnapped along with his singers. His body was found strangled to death 7 days later in another town. If you were Sergio Vega, you'd run for your life, right? Seeing that one of the biggest singers in your genre just got murdered for the type of songs you sing would instill a level of fear in any man, but not Vega. And after the death of Gomez, the media began circulating the news that Vega himself had been killed, but he was still alive. He was even interviewed by a Mexican entertainment website where he spoke about the rumors being untrue. He said, and I quote,
"It's happened to me for years now. Someone tells a radio station or a newspaper I've been killed or suffered a terrible accident. Then I have to telephone my dear mother, who suffers from heart trouble, to reassure her that, in fact, I am still alive."
Sadly, out of his bravery, foolishness, or maybe both, Sergio Vega was murdered while on his way to perform at a village festival concert in the Mexican state of Sinaloa. At around 9:30 p.m. on June 26, 2010, a gang armed with auto weapons in a white truck drove up to his speeding red Cadillac and opened fire on him. The 40-year-old singer's assistant, Sergio Montiel, was also in the car and who miraculously survived, told the reporters that after the vehicle was forced off the road, the gunman ran up to the passenger side where Vega had been sitting and finished him off with shots to the head and chest. More than 30 bullets were found in his deceased body, with half that number being aimed at his torso. And when the news of his death broke out once again, his mother never received a call from him. His death and that of Sergio Gomez moved the Mexican government to place restrictions on narco-corrido music and even push social networks like YouTube to remove dozens of videos from their platform. Sergio Vega was a good man who sang the songs he did out of the fame and money it brought. However, he refused to pay attention to the repercussions, and I guess it's safe to say that they caught up with him.
Knowledge says that people have gone into that police station and never come out. They're never seen again. So what happened to me has happened to others, and I'm a survivor.
June 2013, Ronald James Wooden was arrested by the police, but he sensed that something was wrong. He soon discovered that this police force worked for a deadly cartel, and his day was about to go very bad. Wooden and his Mexican-born wife Carmen moved to Taxco, lured by its rich history in silver jewelry. Being a craftsman, they set up a workshop hoping to build a peaceful life. However, their dream would quickly turn into this nightmare when a neighbor, a former cop, who claimed to belong to a local drug cartel, demanded a 10,000 peso monthly protection payment. Wooden, defiant and principled, refused. He would even file a criminal charge against this cartel member. But what he didn't realize was that he was dealing with a gang that had an influence on the justice system. June 2013, the threats escalated when the neighbor brandished a machete and vowed to dismember Wooden and send him back to America in pieces. Desperate, the police were called, but when they arrived, they immediately targeted Wooden, accusing him of being drunk and disturbing the peace, charges he vehemently denied. The officers didn't care what he had to say. They would drag him into their vehicle and take him to the station. Here he was thrown to the ground and beaten with fists and rifle butts. The cops also tightened his handcuffs and stood on him to cause more excruciating pain. As he would stay at the station, he would take a look around and see that a lot of people were killed here, with all the blood stains on the walls.
Well, they beat me for around 4 hours, close to 4 hours. And some would get tired, and then others would come in, and then others would get tired, others would come in, and I guess they couldn't believe I didn't pass out.
Now his wife Carmen, who followed behind as he was taken to the police station, waited outside in fear. After hours of anxiety, she was asked to pay 200 pesos, which was about $12, for Wooden's release. She quickly rushed him to a hospital because of his broken bones. Wooden's ordeal, though sadly very common in Mexico, drew significant attention because he is an American citizen. So in 2013, a U.S. federal judge ordered a criminal investigation into his beating, an unusual move in a country where such abuses often go unpunished. 1 year later, this investigation by the Human Rights Defense Commission in Guerrero confirmed that Taxco police had illegally detained Wooden and brutally beaten him, and then lied about it. The city's former police chief, Eruviel Salado Chavez, was later arrested on charges of organized crime and kidnapping, linked to the Guerreros Unidos. They blamed this gang for about 100 bodies found in mass graves around Taxco and the nearby city of Iguala. The federal government also believes that 43 college students who disappeared in Iguala in 2014 were kidnapped by corrupt municipal police and handed over to the Guerreros Unidos, who allegedly killed him. Now initially, Wooden filed a criminal complaint but withdrew it after being warned at the magistrate's office. He was told they were planning to make him disappear if he continues to press charges. Besides physical damage, Wooden's equipment was stolen, and as a result of his near-death experience, he and Carmen fled Taxco, moving frequently to evade danger. His injuries and financial strain also prevented him from securing new projects. As he reflects on this ordeal, Wooden remains acutely aware of the peril he escaped.
The FBI is on the case of a missing Texas man they say bragged about stealing thousands of dollars from a Mexican cartel and then disappeared just 2 hours later.
On March 24th, 2023, in the dark hours, just past midnight, Eric Tadeo, with a bloodied face, desperately tries jumping from a moving truck crossing into Mexico, but unseen hands yank him back into the abyss. He messed with the wrong cartel, and now his fate was sealed. Eric Tadeo Ramirez, a resident of Laredo, Texas, made a grave mistake that would soon alter his life irreparably. On this night, Ramirez, emboldened by alcohol and perhaps a misplaced sense of invincibility, began bragging about a significant theft. He boasted to partygoers and over a phone call to a woman about stealing $50,000 from the Cartel del Noreste, a formidable affiliate of the infamous Los Zetas cartel. The Northeast Cartel, also known as Cartel del Noreste or CDN, is one of the most feared and ruthless criminal organizations in Mexico, known for their extreme violence and tight control of regions like Nuevo Laredo. The cartel emerged from the remnants of the Zetas, inheriting their brutal tactics and expanding their influence through terror and corruption. One of the main reasons the CDN is not to be trifled with is their extensive use of violence and terror to maintain control and expand their operations. They engage in a wide array of criminal activities including drug trafficking, extortion, and human smuggling. Their methods include kidnappings, often targeting migrants and those who attempt to aid them. These kidnappings aren't only for profit but a way to exert dominance and instill fear. Despite how dangerous this cartel is, Eric seemed proud of stealing from him. He wouldn't show any fear as he bragged about it, and he actually wanted people around him in the club to listen to him. Maybe he was looking for some form of respect. What he forgot was the fact that, yeah, even though he lived in the US, he was a few miles away from the border in Texas, and the cartel's been known to cross over all the time. They would have their bases all over the place, and this gang would pursue their enemies as long as their location was known. The CDN is notorious for its public displays of violence. They've been known to carry out executions and leave bodies all over the place as a warning to others. In a gruesome incident, they left nearly 24 bodies hanging from a bridge or dismembered and dumped in public areas. Their violence isn't limited to civilians, though. The CDN also targets law enforcement, leading to a significant increase in the murders of police officers. From 2019 to 2022, there were several reported murders of police in regions like Nuevo León, with the CDN being the primary suspect. Now, these attacks are often a broader effort to intimidate and control local authority, ensuring their compliance or silencing any resistance. Given these factors, now Eric's actions against the CDN were particularly dangerous. The cartel's established reputation for swift and brutal retaliation and their comprehensive surveillance systems, with their ability to corrupt and coerce local authorities, made any confrontation with them a highly perilous endeavor. Now we can guess that the cartel had agents within that bar where Eric was bragging. Just after midnight, the repercussions of Ramirez's bravado became starkly apparent. Witnesses at the party reported that 2 or 3 masked men, arriving in a blue Dodge pickup truck, forcibly grabbed Ramirez. They would assault him and drag him towards the truck. This truck was registered to the mother of one of the kidnappers, Jonathan Cabriales. An hour later, security footage captured a harrowing scene. Eric, bloodied and desperate, tried to escape the moving vehicle as it crossed the international bridge into Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. His attempts were futile as he was pulled back into that truck with brutal force. This footage is still being held by the FBI. March 25th, 2023, Eric's girlfriend and sister, horrified by the night's events, immediately contacted the police. Due to the cross-border nature of the crime and the involvement of a powerful cartel, the FBI quickly became involved. 2 days later, there was a break in the case. The investigation had progressed rapidly, and on this date, U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers arrested Jonathan Cabriales as he entered into the United States in the same blue Dodge pickup truck used in the kidnapping. Under interrogation, Cabriales admitted to his role in the abduction, implicating 3 other accomplices who remained at large. Now, this arrest provides crucial details about the operation, but did little to alleviate the growing fears about Eric's fate. In April 2023, both American and Mexican authorities intensified their efforts to locate Ramirez. Despite extensive searches and public appeals, his whereabouts remained unknown. The involvement of the Cartel del Noreste, notorious for its sophisticated evasion tactics, complicated rescue efforts. As of now, Ramirez remains missing, a ghost in the shadows of cartel retribution. 2009, Benjamin LeBaron, an American living in Chihuahua, Mexico, challenged the cartel to stop their activities. What followed might be one of the most horrific incidents involving an American and the cartel.
On Saturday, 18 vehicles drove the caravan of the LeBaron family.
The LeBaron family is an American Mormon family, separated from the Church of the U.S. and moving into the northern part of Mexico where they had a ranch and a pecan farm. They never messed with any drug cartels that were prevalent in the area, and the cartel left the family alone. There was a code amongst criminal gangs in Mexico to never touch an American. It attracted too much attention, and these organizations didn't want that attention, especially not from U.S. authorities. So in 2008, a change came to this peaceful coexistence between the LeBarons and the cartel when one of Benjamin's nephews got kidnapped by him and they demanded a ransom for $4 million. The LeBaron family was wealthy and well-connected, so the government stepped in, and this boy was released without any ransom being paid. Now everyone was happy to have this done and over with, but Benjamin was furious and decided that enough was enough. He was going to confront these cartels that operated in Chihuahua. Guys, this would include the Sinaloa cartel and the Juarez cartel. So as you can guess, things were going to get messed up. Now, to make things even worse, Benjamin was going around to police stations and government offices, campaigning that the cartel activities must end. Naturally, people avoided confronting the cartel. Being from a powerful family, though, this guy was all motivated to take actions, to threaten the cartel, and even stocking up on guns for protection. All this activity caught the attention of Jose Enrique Escajeda, who was a high-ranking member of the Ciudad Juarez cartel. Now, they sent the LeBaron family all kinds of warnings, but they got even more persistent with their campaigns. This led to Enrique placing a hit on Benjamin. July 7th, 2009, SUVs arrive at Benjamin LeBaron's place, and 15 men armed with guns jump out of those vehicles and demand that he step out of that house. Eyewitnesses say they broke his nose, beat up the family, and even assaulted Mrs. LeBaron. There was a lot of screaming and commotion coming from the house, with people too scared to help out. An in-law of the LeBaron family, Louis Winmar, heard the calls for help and just couldn't resist and ran to the residence. Unfortunately, his action only put him in trouble. Louis and Benjamin were both captured and taken away to a spot that was 2 hours' drive outside of the town. Both men were beaten and shot execution style by the roadside, where their bodies would be discovered hours later. The death of Benjamin LeBaron was such a big deal that it was a headline in the local papers.
Que era en venganza por la captura del general y su grupo. Esa es la razón del interrogatorio que este jueves hizo la PGR.
In response, the police conducted raids and arrested several members of the cartel suspected to be involved in that kidnapping and assassination. Some months later, the cartel boss, Escajeda, was also apprehended. Everybody assumed this was the end, but unfortunately, the cartel wasn't done with the LeBarons. What happens next is unimaginable and horrible in the deepest sense. The Ciudad Juarez would go under the radar for a time as the LeBarons continued their efforts to crack down their movement and activities around their territories. The family also invited heavy police presence around the region, making the cartel real frustrated. And on November 4th, 2019, 10 years after Benjamin's murder, the cartel struck the LeBarons once again. Only this time, it would be much worse. That morning, 3 women from the American wing of the LeBaron family, with settlements in La Mora, drove in a convoy along with 12 children. They were on their way to a wedding when they found their path blocked by the La Linea gang, a leading faction in the Ciudad Juarez cartel. A woman would step out of the car to identify herself with her hands raised. She had assumed that the cartel had mistaken them for a rival gang, but she was terribly wrong. Instead, they shot her point blank in the chest, and then they would unload bullets on everybody else. After the terrible incident, there were only 6 survivors who had various degrees of injury. Unfortunately, those attackers were never caught. It is, however, unlikely that this is the end for the LeBarons, as they continue to push against the cartel to this day. December 2nd, 1984, Dennis and Rose Carlson, along with another Jehovah's Witness couple, knocked on the doors of a Guadalajara drug lord's home. They had no clue what was coming, a mistake that would change their lives forever. Dennis and Rose were originally from Redding, California, and they moved to Guadalajara to continue their mission for the Jehovah's Witness Church. According to residents in the area, Jehovah's Witnesses had been enjoying a good reception from the locals, even venturing off into the mountains where the cartel bosses had their homes. While people generally avoided these areas, it looks like Jehovah's Witnesses enjoyed some special privileges. Maybe being an American missionary is a twofer. However, things would change when the organization started getting intel that some DEA agents were in town. From that moment, every American became a suspect. Unfortunately for the missionary couple, they continued to believe they were above the gang violence. That was beginning to eat up northern Mexico at that time. Gang violence was rampant, and people were being assassinated left and right. Locals knew to stay away and never venture near the home of anyone belonging to an organization, but these missionaries were practically dining with the devil. And on December 2nd, 1984, Dennis and Rose had gone knocking on the door of one of these gang bosses, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo. Inside, they met El Chapo. Now the cartel suspecting that the missionaries were actually spies, so Chapo, being a hitman at that time, beat him up until they were bloodied. Other members of the gang proceeded to molest the women. These people were in captivity for several hours while Guzman toyed with them as he cut them with a knife. But he would soon get tired of this game and march the 4 missionaries to a forest, where he would then shoot them in the head with a 9mm Uzi before throwing their lifeless bodies into already dug out graves. To date, the bodies of these missionaries have not been found. During the 80s, the 4 Jehovah's Witnesses would be the first of 7 Americans who were killed by the cartel's senseless murders. Back in the US, the news had reached the families of the victims. The gory details of this incident made Norm Carlson, the dad of Dennis, determined to get justice for his son and the other victims. Without pausing to think, he went straight to Mexico, only for him to get in trouble with the police in Guadalajara, who ordered that he be locked up at the station. Now, what Norm didn't know is that the police was working for the cartel, and they had in fact informed the cartel about Norman snooping around for information about the missionaries. The police soon picked up Norm and beat him up while in custody. They also told him to stop asking questions about the deaths, and luckily he was allowed to go after he promised to cooperate. Now that should have been the end of that case, but this investigation into the kidnapping and murder of another American, a DEA agent named Enrique Camarena, opened up the case once again.
His sentence in the killing of DEA agent Kiki Camarena. The Department of Justice says 14 Mexican service members died.
April 4th, 1985. Drug lords Rafael Caro Quintero, Ernesto Fonseca, and Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo were captured for their involvement in the murder of the Christian couples and were sentenced to jail.
Smuggler turned DEA informant Barry Seal was murdered in 2 bursts of machine gun fire in East Baton Rouge.
April 1983. Barry Seal, a pilot for the Medellin cartel, had surrendered to the federal authorities. However, that would be the beginning of a new life, for which he paid the ultimate price. March 28, 1984, American pilot Barry Seal started this dangerous mission on behalf of the U.S. government as he went undercover as a pilot for the Medellin cartel. This mission put him at the center of the world's largest cartel operation. Barry was no ordinary aviator. His talents had earned him a spot in aviation history. As a former Trans World Airlines captain, his expertise in the cockpit was matched only by his taste for danger. In 1976, Barry's introduction to the cartel was orchestrated by a series of dubious acquaintances. His flair for flying low and avoiding radar had caught the attention of the cartel's emissaries. They needed someone who can navigate their maze of illicit trade routes without raising suspicion, and Barry was their man. The first few flights were seamless. Barry transported cocaine from Colombia to the U.S. with an efficiency that impressed even his hardened employers. With each trip, he earned their trust. But Barry was playing a dangerous game. The Medellin cartel, led by the ruthless Escobar, was notorious for their brutal retribution against anyone who would cross them. In the 1980s, Pablo, the notorious Colombian drug lord, amassed an unprecedented fortune during the height of his power. At his peak, this man was worth $30 billion, a staggering wealth resulting in a dominance over the Medellin cartel, which supplied approximately 80% of the global cocaine market. That immense fortune made him one of the richest men in the world at the time, outstripping many legitimate businessmen. In 1981, Seal reportedly earned up to $500,000 per flight, transporting thousands of kilos of cocaine from Colombia to the U.S. This guy was making millions a month and had developed a flamboyant lifestyle he was willing to risk his life to continue enjoying. The sheer volume of cocaine he transported was staggering. Certain times he could take 10 to 15,000 kilos per trip. That immense flow of narcotics definitely fueled the drug culture and addiction crisis in the U.S. during that era. April 1983. Barry's life took a dark turn as he got caught in a web of lies, spun by multiple government agencies after he surrendered to the authorities. The DEA, CIA, and NSA had a vested interest in the activities of the Medellin cartel. They saw Barry as a pawn, a tool to infiltrate their operations and gather intelligence. The pressure mounted, and the millions he was making a month didn't make things any better. Now Barry was torn between two worlds. He was supposed to be working for the US government, but was more interested in making money with the cartel. Who wouldn't be? Pablo Escobar was one of the richest men in the world at that time, and was willing to pay handsomely for Barry's services. Now during this period, Barry's flights became increasingly dangerous, because the cartel's trust in him was equal only to their suspicion. One slip could mean death. On one occasion, a routine flight nearly ended in catastrophe when Colombian military forces, tipped off by rival cartels, attempted to intercept his plane. Barry's skills saved him, but it was a subtle reminder of the tightrope he was walking. So despite escalating risk, Barry continued his double life. His dual allegiance to the cartel and US government created a constant state of unease. Now the cartel, unaware of his cooperation with the Americans, grew more reliant on his services. Meanwhile, Barry fed crucial information back to his handlers, information that was instrumental in understanding the cartel's operations. On July 19, 1983, Barry's duplicity had reached its peak with Operation Screamer, a mission devised by the DEA. He was tasked with photographing high-ranking cartel members during a cocaine handoff in Nicaragua. The photos would provide irrefutable evidence of the cartel's involvement in drug trafficking and implicate the Nicaraguan government. Barry's covert operation was a success, but his fate was sealed. These pictures were explosive, even leading to a political scandal in Washington, D.C. The White House was embroiled with this Iran-Contra affair and found itself mired in controversy. So while the government is scrambling to manage their fallout, Barry was left exposed, as the Medellin would quickly discover the identity of the traitor. Barry's life was in great danger, and in this desperate bid for protection, he entered witness protection. But his notoriety made him impossible to hide. Following the conviction of the people in his damning pictures for which he was the main witness, Barry only got years of probation in return for the excellent but deadly service he rendered to the U.S. authorities. He was then assigned to the Salvation Army's Community Treatment Center in Baton Rouge. However, the final days of Barry Seal were marked by paranoia and dread. as he knew the cartel was still after him. His fear would only increase, knowing that their reach was long and unrelenting. On February 19, 1986, Barry was gunned down in Baton Rouge by assassins sent by the Medellin cartel just 3 weeks into his probation.
And put it on YouTube. But this is where Barry Seal was assassinated, here at the Salvation Army in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Shortly after that assassination, authorities arrested 3 men in connection to the murder: Miguel Velez, Bernardo Vasquez, and Luis Carlos Quintero Cruz. These individuals were linked to the Medellin cartel and were found to have entered the U.S. with false identities. The arrests occurred within days of the killing, making a swift response by law enforcement. In March 1987, during the trial, it was revealed that Velez, Vasquez, and Quintero Cruz had been hired by the cartel to eliminate Seal due to his cooperation with the U.S. authorities. Testimonies and evidence presented would show extensive planning and execution of that assassination, indicating the cartel's desperation to silence Seal. These men were convicted and sentenced to life, a significant blow to the Medellin cartel's operation. Looking into that assassination closer, they saw a complex web of cartel activity and connection. It was discovered that Seal's murder had been orchestrated by high-ranking cartel members, including Jose Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, one of Escobar's top lieutenants, who was later killed in a raid by the Colombian government. The assassination of Seal shows how far the cartel will go to protect their interests and deal with anyone who messes with them.